Subcommittee on Aviation will come to order. I ask unanimous consent that the chairman be authorized to declare recess at any time during today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Chairman, I also ask unanimous consent that members not on the subcommittee be permitted to sit with the subcommittee at today's hearing and ask questions.
Without objection, so ordered.
As a reminder, if members wish to insert a document into the record, please also email it to documentsti@mail.house.gov. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Stanton. I now recognize myself for purposes of an opening statement for 5 minutes. I want to start by thanking all the witnesses for being here today. This hearing is about bottlenecks in aviation. And of course, when you think about bottlenecks in aviation, I think that most folks probably think immediately about passengers, about commercial airlines and transportation experiences, and certainly that's a big part of it. But we need to be thinking about the future, which also includes new technology, it includes commercial space launch. And I want to just give 3 quick statistics just to paint a picture, not of what the aviation sector looks like today and the challenges and stressors and bottlenecks, but thinking about what it looks like in the future. For commercial space launch, half of all licensed space launches ever have occurred in the last 5 years. I'll say that again. Half of all licensed space launches have occurred in the last 5 years. In 2015, there were 14 authorized commercial space transportation operations, and in 2023, there were 113. By 2028, it's projected that there are going to be 338. So just in commercial space launch, when you go to commercial passengers, America had its busiest travel day ever on Sunday with more than 3 million passengers screened. That record that was set on Sunday broke the record that existed before that was set in just the month of June of this year. 8 or 9 of the 10 busiest travel days ever have occurred since May 23rd of this year. And last year, airlines carried 819 million passengers on domestic flights. This year is expected to be even higher as the industry climbs to the ever elusive goal of 1 billion passengers. In the drone space, in 2016, there were 20,000 remote pilots. Now, there are over 400,000. There are currently more than 780,000 drones registered with the FAA, and that number is projected to grow in excess of 1 million just in the next few years. So let me say it again. You look at the stresses today, you look at the industry today, in the future, this is just going to grow greater and greater. The good news is that folks here on this dais and a lot of the great staff behind us and in this room worked tirelessly over the last 2 years and really, really proud working with my friend Mr. Cohen and others in delivering the FAA reauthorization bill that was signed into law just a few months ago. And that bill does address a lot of the bottlenecks that we have identified, either by giving the FAA the authority to do so, or helping to give the certainty to industry to help to address some of these choke points or growing demands. But one of the biggest challenges we have right now is with ATC, air traffic control, and the controllers. The FAA is approximately 3,000 controllers short right now. We took a lot of steps in the FAA bill to help to improve the hiring and to really max out and hiring and move the needle in the near term, which again is the real pinch point in the pipeline. You're seeing great disparity with retirements in the in air traffic controllers and the hiring, meaning that they're not keeping pace with the hiring pipeline with those that are retiring. And thinking about that bottleneck that hits a bit closer to home, our office has heard from Louisiana Tech in 2020 about the need for more designated pilot examiners to meet the training needs of the students. So it's not just about air traffic controllers, it's about ensuring that we can meet the demand for pilots. And if the designated pilot examiners are short, then it's going to have an impact on the ability of us to meet the targets on pilot demand as well. So look, I'm not going to go through every single problem that we have and every single bottleneck that we have, but I do want to say that we cannot rest on the laurels of having this FAA bill that was signed into law. We've got to focus on implementation. We need to focus on this explosive growth of this really exciting industry in aviation, whether it is about passenger travel, it's about the general aviation, it's about the innovation in these new platforms, or it's about commercial space launch. I think the FAA bill was a fantastic foundation, and I'm looking forward to hearing from some of our witnesses today and hearing about your thoughts about how we move forward in implementation, and importantly, what the future looks like and what we need to be doing to facilitate this innovation and improving the passenger experience. With that, I now recognize Ranking Member Cohen, 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Graves. It's obvious that when Chairman Graves goes home at night, it's not Le Bon Temps Roulette, it's not beignets, it's not jambalaya, it's absorbing and reading all of this stuff. And he's got it in his mind and his gut and can explain it well. He's been a great subcommittee chair. I was so looking forward to him being my ranking member next year. It's a great loss of him not going to be here to do that. He's covered the whole terrain, and I want to thank the witnesses for being here. We did pass a bipartisan infrastructure bill and FAA, a reauthorization bill. It was truly bipartisan. We call the infrastructure bill bipartisan. It was not that bipartisan. There were a couple of folks here. But the FAA reauthorization was, and this committee did a great job in getting it passed, but we do need to implement it because there are shortages of employees. The bottlenecks that we've seen have been described. Airline pilots, we need more and more. Air traffic controllers, they're behind. They get slowed up during the pandemic, and we need to train more of those. Aviation maintenance technicians, inspectors, designated pilot examiners, LaTeX. All those areas need work. Shortages of these vital members of the workforce have resulted in subpar experiences across the ecosystem of aviation, and our FAA reauthorization bill will allow us to come back and improve those areas. We also have gaps in minority hiring all through the aviation industry. In my community, which is a majority African American, and Federal Express is the home of is based there, there's great opportunities for African Americans to get employment, and they need to have training opportunities, which this bill will help with, and we need to urge and see to it that the workforce looks more like America and gives people opportunities to move up the ladder. Air traffic controllers said it was really the pandemic that hit them, but there's been problems with wages and retirements and all of that. Historical staffing challenges facing air traffic organization technicians, such as increased workload without additional resource and training, have exacerbated this bottleneck. This is why our FAA reauthorization bill includes provisions to maximize controller hiring, improve staffing models, and expand the FAA's resources to meet the evolving needs of our air traffic system. My district of Memphis needs more designated examiners or DPEs. That's a need. DPEs provide required practical tests and check rides for aspiring pilots, but their uneven distribution throughout the country and the limited incentives to serve as a DPE can pose scheduling challenges for pilot candidates. The FAA reauthorization will help streamline the process of obtaining a check ride by creating an FAA office to facilitate national coordination of DPEs and improving the agency's research tool to provide more information about the credentials, qualifications, and availability of designated pilot examiners. Mental health is another issue that directly impacts the aviation workforce and the safety of our aviation system. Being up there in that tower for long hours and the tension and stress that you get, it's not easy. Pilots and air traffic controllers often do not get the help they need for mental health issues due to the consequences of speaking up or seeking treatment. That needs to be corrected. They need to get the medical help that they might need because that's a stressful job. Our aviation sector must better support mental health of our aviation workforce to ensure public safety. That's what they're looking out for. The FAA reauthorization bill will require the establishment of an aeromedical Innovation and Modernization Working Group, which will review and make recommendations to the agency's medical processes, including policies on mental health, education, and outreach. Creates a task group to monitor and evaluate the FAA's efforts to assist and provide more resources for aviation workforce. A lot more work needs to be done, and I commend Chairman Graves for holding this hearing on this subject. I thank the witnesses for being here, and I'm looking forward to your testimony. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen, for the majority of your statement. Looks like, yeah, we're not visited by some folks, so I now like to welcome our witnesses and thank you for being here today. We're going to do a few quick unanimous consent.
Briefly, I'd like to take a moment to explain our lighting system to our witnesses. If its light is green, forward, go, just like in a car. On the gas, you're going. But when it turns to yellow, you got to slow down because the policemen are looking at you and might give you a ticket. You got to slow down. When it gets to be red, you might get a citation, so stop. I ask unanimous consent that witnesses' full statements be included in the record.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the record of today's hearing remain open until such time as our witnesses provide answers to any questions that may be submitted to them in writing.
Without objection, so ordered.
And I also ask unanimous consent that the record remain open for 15 days for any additional comments, information submitted by the members or witnesses to be included in the record of today's hearing.
Without objection, so ordered. Thank you. As your written testimony has been made part of the committee's record, the subcommittee asks that you limit your oral remarks to 5 minutes. And with that, Louisiana's own Monty Montgomery from Louisiana Tech, where I went to school, in my diverse college education experience. But Mr. Montgomery, thank you for being here. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Graves, Ranking Member Cohen, and members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to participate in today's hearing. And thank you for your attention to aviation. My name's Matthew Montgomery. I just go by Monty. Please call me Monty. I'm a former military maintainer, 20 years active duty service with nuclear weapons, and 11 years as a government civil service working for Global Strike Command. Since I was a child way back in the 1970s, I always loved aviation and proud to be called an airman. I'd like to bring to your attention the aviation academic training bottlenecks that we are currently facing at Louisiana Tech University. As you may know, our university has a rich history in professional aviation, and we take pride in the quality of our programs. However, we are currently experiencing several challenges that are impacting our aviation academic training. These challenges include availability of flight training to meet student demand, scheduling effectiveness, availability of qualified professors and instructors, funding, aircraft purchasing backlog, and factors such as designated pilot examiner availability and lack of forecasted hiring trends. In response to these challenges, Louisiana Tech University is taking proactive measures to address the issues. We are focusing on supporting our current students in flight aviation management, and additionally, we're looking for growth opportunities in providing mechanics, air traffic controllers, and unmanned aerial systems airmen. Despite our efforts, there are areas where we need additional support, specifically require assistance in terms of funding, aircraft purchasing, professor pay gap, and better forecasting of industry, military, and corporate hiring trends. These areas are critical to our ability to overcome the current bottlenecks to ensure we provide required number of airmen when needed, ensure the quality and effectiveness of our aviation training programs to support growth and adaptability. Louisiana Tech is accredited by ABI. It is our opinion that aviation schools should be accredited by an independent accrediting body such as ABI to ensure quality of training. Historically, we've seen dramatic differences on when we pick up students with private pilot from other flight schools, many times requiring extensive retraining to get to acceptable flight standards. Moving on to partnerships, we have several partnerships with large universities, including United Aviate, Southwest Destination 225, and regional airlines, including Republic Airlines, SkyWest Airlines, and Mesa Airlines. Our campus also supports Air Force ROTC, providing private pilot training to future officers. While these partnerships provide effective pipelines for our airmen and into aviation, we will be looking for help for industrial partners in our hard-to-fill vacancies, equipment, and helping students get flight funding. The superior work you have done to pass the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024 will present opportunities for us to apply for grants and obtain funding needed to bridge these gaps. However, students still need assistance, as our primary dropout indicator for students in aviation is funding. The cost of flight is just too great of a burden for most Americans, which is the primary root cause of Louisiana Tech's private pilot dropout rate that is historically at 68.2%. In closing, aviation training pipelines need assistance to properly meet U.S. demands. We need to forecast better. We need additional funding assistance to procure aircraft and equipment. We need additional assistance filling in pay gaps, and students need assistance in funding their dreams of flight. Correcting these problems will remove bottlenecks in the production environment and better set up the U.S. training pipeline to fill projected needs. For reference and review, I've also submitted to the hearing record my report titled Aviation Academic Training Bottlenecks, a perspective from a Part 141 flight training school. Lastly, I'd like to thank every one of you who worked on the FAA reauthorization bill. On behalf of all the airmen you have helped and will be helping, your tireless efforts are greatly appreciated. We needed your help, and you valiantly heard our call, so thank you. I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. I want to let members know that I told Mr. Montgomery last night that we were going to take him on a brief Capitol tour, and last night, and I think we kept you out till maybe 11:30 at night last night. No alcohol was involved, but we did have him out way past his bedtime in the Capitol because it's such a cool building. We were all over the place in all the nooks and crannies. So I appreciate you being here today, and I apologize for keeping you up late last night.
Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. As a telling chairman, Louisiana Tech reminds me of some great football games with Memphis State back in the 50s and 60s. They had real good games. Mr. Robbins, you're next, and you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Graves and Ranking Member Cohen and distinguished members of the committee. My name is Michael Robbins, and I'm the president and CEO of AUVSI, which is the world's largest trade association representing uncrewed systems, robotics, and autonomy. And I'm honored to be with you today representing our members from the UAS or drone industry, as well as the advanced air mobility or AAM industry. I'm also delighted that my son Jack could be here today. Jack is 13, interested in aviation, and represents a potential member of the future world-leading aviation workforce here in America. As you know, the United States leads the world as the gold standard for aviation safety. However, to safeguard our position as the world leader and to recruit, retain, and engage the aviation workforce of the future, we must continue to advance the policy and regulatory framework to integrate advanced aviation technologies. The United States Congress, led by the tremendous bipartisan leadership of this subcommittee and the full Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, put the nation on the right path with the recent passage of the FAA Reauthorization Act, which is now law. And AUVSI is tremendously grateful to the members of this committee and your hardworking staffs for the years of investment into this foundational legislation. You have set the standard for how Congress should work effectively to advance good public policy. Thank you. We are now at a pivotal time in aviation history, with drones and advanced air mobility aircraft unlocking significant benefits in both safety and technology leadership. With those benefits will come significant economic activity and workforce opportunities. As you know, drones offer a cost-effective solution for critical operations, including public safety and utility inspection, critical maintenance, precision agriculture, and more. And AAM is revolutionizing propulsion systems, battery technology, and flight controls, unlocking new segments not served by traditional aviation, and enhancing workforce productivity and safety. Companies are opening high-rate production facilities across America and creating thousands of high-quality manufacturing jobs to build the aircraft required to meet the current and future demands. And drones and AAM are opening aviation careers to a broader and more diverse workforce, including workers with physical disabilities, those without advanced technical degrees, and rural workers who do not live near economic centers of legacy aviation. The true potential for workforce growth, however, will only be realized when the regulatory frameworks are in place for aircraft certification and operations. The forthcoming Beyond Visual Line of Sight rulemaking for drones and the Powered Lift SFAR for electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft are required for the U.S. to remain the world leader in aviation safety and to build the workforce of the future. Without these regulatory frameworks in place, innovation will be stifled, operations will remain limited, and the drone and AAM industries will be unable to scale in the near term in the United States. So industry stands ready to work with the FAA to get these rules done right and on a timeline that unlocks the full potential of advancing aviation safety, workforce growth, and U.S. economic opportunity. Further, at this key moment, the need to modernize and expand our industry and government workforce has never been more urgent. A few quick points. First, the FAA's future hinges on real dollar increases, not just a reshuffling of existing staff. New funds are needed for the FAA to hire new subject matter experts capable of tackling the unique challenges of drones and AAM integration. Second, full funding of the workforce development and grant programs included in the FAA Reauthorization Act is critical. And third, integrating a curriculum from elementary school through community colleges and four-year universities that support the drone and AAM industries is essential. Drones and AAM-specific training must include innovative, cost-effective, and safe certification methods. And AUVSI is proud to partner with numerous collegiate training initiative schools as part of our advanced drone training program, Trusted Operator, to provide a higher level of drone knowledge, flight proficiency, and safety and risk management practices that are valued by employers and customers of commercial drone operations. In conclusion, on behalf of AUVSI and our members, I want to thank Chairman Garrett Graves for his leadership of this subcommittee, and as the chair or co-chair of the House Unmanned Systems Caucus, along with Representative Titus. I echo Representative Cohen's sentiments. Your leadership has been tremendous in advancing aviation safety and putting advanced aviation at the forefront of the minds of both Congress and the regulators. Your leadership is going to be sorely missed in the 119th Congress, sir, but we know that you're going to continue to serve our nation in meaningful ways for many decades in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins. I appreciate it. Jack, do you have anything to add or correct in your father's testimony?
I love my dad.
I got to tell you, I was wondering about his discretion bringing a young, innocent child to Congress. This is no place to marinate. No, welcome to the committee. Appreciate you being here. Ms. Damato, you're recognized for 5 minutes. Please turn your microphone on.
Chairman Graves, Ranking Member Cohen, and members of the Transportation and Infrastructure Aviation Subcommittee, thank you for holding this hearing on the importance of recruiting, retaining, and engaging aviation talent. I'm Jo Damato. I'm the Senior Vice President, Education, Development, Workforce Development, and Training at the National Business Aviation Association. I've been there since 2001. On behalf of NBAA's 11,000 member companies, I'm honored to testify today. Many of our members are small businesses who rely on general aviation to connect to communities all over the country. They support 1.2 million American jobs and $247 billion in economic output. Thanks to the leadership of this committee, we have all welcomed the strong bipartisan FAA reauthorization to ensure America can lead in fostering the future of the aviation workforce. Notably, the law includes the first ever general aviation title, recognizing the importance of GA to the larger aviation community. I'm also honored to testify today as a member of the Youth Access to American Jobs and Aviation Task Force, which sunset in 2022. As someone who wanted to be a pilot since she was 8 years old, the opportunity to serve on the task force resonated with me. I grew up in South New Jersey, and no one in my family was connected to aviation. My high school guidance counselor did not know how to advise me on an aviation career path. As a teen, I was the only young woman learning to fly at my local airport. Because of my gender, I was not permitted to fly all of the flight school's airplanes. Because of my gender. I can't believe I still hear stories like this, and I'm hopeful we can bring about some real change with this bill. I'm also the proud mom of 2 teenagers pursuing aviation as their career paths. My husband, an airline captain, and I know their future success and that of their peers means that aviation needs a diverse, dynamic, and engaged workforce to help it continue to thrive in this country. And despite the high demand, multiple challenges exist as barriers to those who want to embark on an aviation career path. The FAA reauthorization bill will help remove barriers for those seeking aviation careers while expanding the aviation workforce pipeline. It mandates that the FAA implement key strategic recommendations from the Women in Aviation Advisory Board and the Youth Task Force to address these challenges. And if implemented effectively, these provisions should move aviation workforce forward in ways that have not been possible in recent decades. There are 5 areas that reflect the recommendations submitted. First, early awareness and engagement. Engagement with young people needs to start early. The FAA's STEM Aviation Space and Education Program, AVSED, is best positioned to be that connective tissue, across the 9 FAA regions to bring together all stakeholders to create these early awareness opportunities. Second, access to information. There is a need for easy-to-access resources for caregivers, teachers, guidance counselors, and youth to learn about information and resources to become a career aviation professional. We need a one-stop shop national website to be the destination and central source of information on pursuing a career in aviation. FAA AvSed has a webpage. It could be the foundation for this destination. Third is collaboration. The bill calls for a national strategic plan for aviation workforce development, key to meaningful progress, a connected career pathway that draws students into aviation and aerospace all across the United States. There are so many examples of national aviation associations addressing workforce with their own initiatives: EAA, Women in Aviation, OBAP, GAMA, AOPA, and NBAA. Together with the FAA, they have the potential to create an entire journey for an individual. The financial hurdle. We know cost is one of the greatest barriers to entry. The workforce development grants that were established in 2018 for pilots and aviation maintenance technical workers have been expanded with the reauthorization in 2024 to include manufacturing technical workers, and 20% grants for the Willa Brown Aviation Education Program. And finally, and one of the hardest to change, the barrier is culture. Culture is the biggest barrier to women in aviation. It's the hardest to change, and I know that firsthand. Thankfully, the bill establishes the Bessie Coleman Women in Aviation Advisory Committee, which will help continue the work to address the factors that negatively impact the recruitment and retention of women in aviation. This hearing highlights the importance of recruiting, retaining, and engaging aviation talent and the work that must be energized as outlined in the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024. The FAA, together with the support of its stakeholders, needs to be invested in its success through implementation of the provisions in this bill. Now is the time to create awareness for aviation careers everywhere in the United States. Now is the time to ensure access to resources needed to achieve career success, information sharing, collaboration, and removal of financial and cultural barriers. The pipeline is critical to our strength as a nation. NBA and our members appreciate this subcommittee's continued leadership, and we welcome the opportunity to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Damato. As the brother of 3 Trailblazer sisters and the father of 2 Trailblazer daughters, I appreciate your efforts, and just want to make note, I had a female pilot who flew us in to DC on Monday, and she did a fantastic job.
Thank you, and with the chair's blessing, I'd like to call on Mr. Sparrow for 5 minutes to present his testimony.
Good morning, thank you. Chairman Graves, I guess Ranking Member Garcia now at the moment, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to testify on behalf of the Professional Aviation Safety Specialists. My name is Dave Sparrow. I'm the president of PASS. PASS appreciates the opportunity to share information and recommendations regarding the FAA workforce. PASS represents approximately 11,000 FAA and DoD employees. The largest PASS bargaining unit is technical operations. PASS represents approximately 4,800 technicians responsible for installing, operating, maintaining, and repairing more than 74,000 systems and equipment used for air traffic control and navigation. The number of employees performing these critical tasks has been on a consistent decline for years, helped in part by an increasing number of retirements. While the media focuses on the shortage of air traffic controllers when reporting on non-weather-related flight delays, the shortage of technicians is just as serious. The consequence of insufficient technician staffing manifests itself in increased restoration times during an outage and more air traffic delays. It also causes inadequate shift coverage for technicians, which means we do not have the right person available to resolve a crisis when it occurs. The situation became concerning enough that the FAA performed an analysis and found a correlation between the shortage of technicians and the frequency and duration of corrective maintenance actions. The report concluded that an increase in unscheduled equipment outages was directly related to less maintenance being performed. Hiring and training new technicians is cumbersome. Technicians must be skilled and proficient on multiple systems. It takes years to fully train a technician to perform all necessary duties related to the position. The FAA has been developing a technical operations staffing model for over a decade, but progress is slow. PASS is asking the FAA be directed to establish a workforce plan for technical operations and collaborate with PASS in its creation and implementation. While PASS has made it clear to the FAA that we are ready and willing to assist in the development of a plan, our offers have been declined or ignored. PASS also represents aviation safety inspectors and other employees within the Office of Aviation Safety. PASS is extremely concerned about the agency's inability to effectively and consistently staff the inspector workforce. Considering recent events, it's more important than ever that the agency knows how many inspectors are needed to safely monitor the system. FAA Administrator Mike Whitaker testified before your Senate colleagues last month and said more inspectors are being sent to Boeing to oversee Boeing and its suppliers. However, we do not know where the agency is transferring these inspectors from and if the oversight of other manufacturers or airlines will be impacted. The staffing model currently being used by the agency is insufficient to determine the number of aviation safety inspectors needed. While each of PASS's bargaining units has specific challenges in ensuring proper recruitment, retention, and engagement, there are overarching hurdles that face the agency. We have concluded that the FAA is not hiring enough technicians and inspectors, and this is the primary bottleneck that limits the opportunities for aviation workers in the FAA. Retention of current employees and new hires goes hand in hand with recruitment. The FAA must provide a clear career progression path for its employees with opportunities for professional growth, which in turn would open up opportunities for new employees. Offering flexible working conditions and ensuring a healthy work-life balance can help retain employees. PASS thanks this committee for their work to pass legislation reauthorizing the FAA for the next 5 years. Important language in the legislation that PASS supported will go a long way toward protecting our workforce now and in the future. It is worth noting that PASS is currently in negotiations on new contracts with the FAA for the employees we represent in the ATO and aviation safety. These negotiations present a significant opportunity for PASS to work with the agency on ways to enhance recruitment and retention. PASS respectfully requests that the committee consider our areas of concern and recognize the critical contributions made by the employees we represent. PASS is ready to work with you to ensure that the U.S. air traffic control system remains the safest aviation system in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sparrow. I appreciate all of your testimony today. Going to yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Arkansas, the chair of the Highways and Transit Subcommittee, Mr. Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the witnesses for being here today. Mr. Robbins, I'm particularly interested in what the FAA needs to be doing for new entrants in national airspace, AAM, and unmanned systems, especially when it comes to cybersecurity. So we talk about the aviation industry, and first thing you think of is probably you want to be a pilot or something like that. But I'm concerned about some of the other areas that we should be focused on as we see the expansion of non-traditional aircraft. For example, how do we strengthen the FAA's cybersecurity policies and ensure that the FAA has the appropriate workforce in place to deal with that? It's very sensitive in this industry. So talk about that a little bit, the policies that we need to be engaged in, what you think the future holds with regard to that particular aspect of the aviation industry.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question, Congressman. About 2 years ago, AUVSI launched our Trusted Cyber program to tackle this this challenge head on. We recognize that this is a shared responsibility between industry and government, and that it's important for us to also be educating our members and sort of be the tip of the spear on getting cybersecurity right as drones and advanced air mobility are integrated into the NAS. The FAA reauthorization, as you know, sir, contains a provision directing the FAA to establish a new executive director for cybersecurity. We think that's a terrific step in starting to build the subject matter expertise within the agency. As FAA is a safety organization, so sometimes security doesn't always fit perfectly into their mission set. But I would give the FAA a lot of credit for making significant headway just in the last couple of years and moving the ball forward. FAA stands ready to work with the FAA on this issue and bring subject matter expertise to the table, whether that's through aviation rulemaking committees, which draw upon industry for advice and counsel, or even perhaps the use of special government employees to bring in workforce from industry temporarily as SGEs to help provide subject matter expertise. AUVSI also offers a certification program for platforms and components to go through and be certified on both their cybersecurity as well as their supply chain risk. They go through a very vigorous pen test, and they also go through a significant supply chain review. And we have a standing MOU with the Defense Innovation Unit of the Department of Defense, where all of the information we gathered is immediately transferred over to the DoD, so they can then understand the integrity of the systems that AUVSI has validated to be able to pull them over for the warfighter as well.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Montgomery, if I heard you correctly in your testimony, you mentioned that you had been basically in a career in the military as a maintainer. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Talk about what we talk about recruiting and retention, and again, when we talk about aviation, tend to think about pilots. But the opportunities in what your career field was that you spent in the military and how that translates over into civilian aviation industry.
With mechanics, or maintainers, we definitely have a work to do within Louisiana Tech. We want to open up our doors and start producing mechanics. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So we'd like to work further with, we have a couple of partners within Louisiana. We're going to start producing mechanics. We see that as a need. I see it from my experiences in the military as something we need to work on, because our maintenance bills are extremely high and just getting higher the least amount of mechanics we have out there. Is that about what you were looking for, sir?
Well, I'm kind of wanting to drill down on the career path. What a young person graduating from high school, what the future might hold for them in the industry outside of flying or operating, but as a maintainer, and could they expect a fulfilling and rewarding career on the maintainer side of things?
Oh yes, sir, absolutely. I love maintenance. I love to get out there and get my hands dirty, turning wrenches. Anything working with the engines, the airplanes, airframes, anything else like that, it's so fun. If we could get it out there that there's more to aviation than just being the pilot and great jobs, that'll be huge.
Appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, Mr. Cohen from Tennessee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. It's good to follow Mr. Crawford. He's across the river from me. I hope you ask some good questions that help Memphis, too. Monty, I want to start with you. La Tech and Memphis State, now Louisiana Tech University and University of Memphis. But we still have some of the same problems. We're not maybe getting as much as LSU or UT in some of the funding programs. University of Memphis has told me, as well as our community college, Southwest, that they have had challenges in getting provisionally certified as a Part 144 flight school. They want to set up a knowledge testing center there. Did Louisiana Tech University face similar difficulties in getting certifications or other approvals, and whether does this affect your ability to recruit and retain students?
Yes, sir. We were seeking in-house DP examining authority, but our recent rates of passing the test is dipped below the 90% requirement, so we are facing problems there. However, we do have airman knowledge testing within Louisiana Tech that we provide students on a as-needed basis.
Is there any reason that you know why they require a 90% passage to continue the program?
I believe, sir. I'd have to verify that data to ensure.
I guess the idea is that they want to be where they're most likely to have graduates, but at the same time, some of the students maybe possibly they didn't have adequate preparation, and so they keep them in the hole and don't give them a chance to go up. Is that something you've seen, some of the people at La Tech that maybe didn't get the grade but have potential?
Yes, sir. As we crack open the enrollments, we've had over 370 applicants this year and 270 last year. So as we crack that open to get more students in, we're going to get more of a variance on people that can pass a test or not. We do have students that are great pilots, they just can't pass the test. And so you could see a dip in that. And as well as we make our aviation maintainers, management take the FAA test as well.
Do you think there should be some change to that standard, either the test score or the 90% requirement, or is that something we just have to deal with?
I believe some research would be good in that area to verify that's a good standard, and that if a flight school is extremely difficult on their own airmen, that maybe that should be taken into account.
We have something else in common, getting our hands dirty. You like to do it with machines, I like to do it with ribs.
Oh,
But some of often the most visible members of the aviation system are flight crews and pilots, but aircraft maintenance technicians also play a vital part in ensuring safe and efficient operation. What is the role of schools and universities in training that part of the air workforce?
in training mechanics, sir?
Yeah, training technicians and mechanics that support the airplanes.
With being a mechanic, you could be a good mechanic without a college education. But you can be a great mechanic with a college education. Once I obtained my degrees, I could understand statistics and outliers, and I could better track down difficult positions. So the university providing the rest of the information you need to help run a maintenance program is direly needed. It turns you just from a wrench turner into a manager, a leader.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Damato, you testified that when you were learning to fly, you were not allowed to use one of the aircraft available to students because the owner would not let a woman fly his plane. Even in 2024, I fear some of my constituents in the majority and minority cities of Memphis, Tennessee may face similar hurdles, whether it's race or gender. Can you talk about the importance of a diverse talent pool for the future success of our aviation industry?
Thank you for that question. It does astound me that the challenges that I encountered in the mid-'90s are still challenges that women and minorities are encountering today. Shouldn't be happening. I do want to deliver some good news. The collegiate aviation programs, I attended one of them. My son attends one of them, and I spent a lot of time with collegiate aviators. It doesn't seem to be something that they're encountering once they get into that formal flight training environment. But when you're at the general aviation airports, where it still might be rare to find someone who is interested in aviation as a career path that doesn't look like everybody else at the airport, you're still the odd person out. Chairman Graves, you noted that you had a female pilot on your flight yesterday. The fact that you noticed that means there's still not enough of us, and we need to make improvements to attract women and minorities to aviation, to show them more examples of see it, be it, to give them mentoring opportunities, to understand the resources they can take advantage of, especially funding being one of them, how they can work on being both a caregiver and also pursuing an aviation career and the support they need to do that. And really that sense of belonging, that culture is not going to hold them back. When we are a diverse industry, we can get to more efficiency, we can get to more safety. That diversity of thought allows us not to all just agree with each other, to bring different perspectives from where we come from all over this country, and from different environments, and use that for better decision-making, which will have a great impact on the future of our industry. Also, that's the only way we're going to fill all these jobs that are available. Women make up 47% of the American workforce, but we're still stuck at about 20% in aviation representation. Women in leadership positions in aviation, still single digits. Women airline captains, also still single digits. There's a lot of work to be done.
Thank you so much. Are you from Louisiana?
I'm from New Jersey.
New Jersey. Oh, your name looks like a linebacker at LSU. Why?
No relation.
Thank you. Recognize Recognize the gentleman from Arkansas, the Chair of the Natural Resources Committee, Mr. Westerman, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Graves. Thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Ms. Damato, your testimony is inspiring, not only the 5 minutes that you had, but I think the 17 pages of single-spaced written testimony shows that you're obviously passionate about what you do. You've got a great story to tell. And I think you had 5 different areas that you said you're working on in the written testimony, or places that things need to be improved. Information sharing, collaboration, all of those are very important. And you alluded a little bit to the removing financial barriers. So in the FAA reauthorization of 2024, we did put in targeted reforms to strengthen the Aviation Workforce Development Grant that was established in the 2018 FAA bill. And given that the greatest barrier to entry facing most individuals in the workforce is the high cost of education, how important of a role do grant programs such as these play in attracting a wide array of individuals into the aviation workforce?
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for recognizing my passion for aviation. I mean, it really was something that started when I was 8 years old, and that story is really common. It's just a matter of, do you stick with it? Is that just one opportunity and no one is there to encourage you and you turn around? Or if it's not a culture issue, is it a financial barrier or something else that puts the thought in your head and then removes it just as quickly? The financial hurdle to becoming an aviation professional is real. It is the most expensive for a pilot. It's still expensive for someone who wants to be a technician. And having the desire for that career path and the passion is wonderful, but if you can't match it with the ability to pay for it, then it becomes concerning because it becomes a revolving door and we lose wonderful people who want to work in our industry to some other industries that have a different, less barriers to entry. The grants are fantastic. Mr. Montgomery talked in his testimony about the type of funding that they need at their public university to be able to support continuing their fleet modernization, attracting the instructors that they need to build an air traffic program. What would that look like for them and what expertise do they have to have? And so the schools need the funding to be able to develop and grow with this new technology that we're all trying to understand. How do we educate to? And then the students need access to these grants as well because they may have their caregivers themselves, they may have low credit scores, they may not have the ability to get access to the loans that they need. And again, if they can't get enough merit from where they want to attend, they may find themselves just with a wonderful passion and an unattainable goal. So it's incredibly important.
Right, and then you also talk about information sharing and relayed the experience of your guidance counselor who really didn't know how to advise you on an aviation career. I think told you to go study aeronautical engineering, which obviously would have given you a path into an aviation job, but it was almost by accident you found out that there were actually college programs for pilots. How do we get that message out so that guidance counselors understand the wide array of jobs that are available? In my district, and I would guess if you talk to most high school kids and said, would you like a career in aviation? The first thing, I want to be a Top Gun pilot, or I want to fly for an airline. But the jobs in aviation in my district are airplane, fabricating parts for airplanes, doing maintenance on parts. We have a large aerospace manufacturing business, and even on the defense side, we have one of the biggest aerospace industrial defense parks in the country. They build the HIMARS and all of that good stuff. So how do we get that message out so that other kids that want to go into aviation aren't told their routes either to go in the military or to be an aeronautical engineer?
Yeah, it needs to be intentional and not accidental. And for all of us and all the people I know sitting behind me and watching here who are passionate about aviation, we all have an answer. We all have part of the answer. When somebody is interested, we all need to have the same answer, that one-stop shop. What is the one national resource we're going to send you to? I watch a lot of Major League Baseball, and I see buildsubmarines.com commercials during every single game, and you can't miss it. We need something like that that rolls off all of our tongues, that gets that individual caregiver, educator, guidance counselor, youth to say, let me go to that URL, let me scan that code, let me find the information that I need. So my desire turns to awareness, turns to knowledge and ability.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Westerman. Gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Stanton's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for hosting this important hearing and witnesses for being here today. The FAA acknowledges it experiencing an air traffic controller shortage, and this shortage has major impacts: fewer flights, longer delays, and the risk of near misses. and we have seen too many of those this year. In the bipartisan FAA reauthorization, we focus on the recruitment, hire, and retention of air traffic controllers. One of the FAA's most successful government industry partnerships is the FAA Federal Contract Tower Program. There are 7 contract towers in Arizona, including Phoenix Mesa Gateway, and these are the busiest contract towers in our country. These contract towers account for approximately 1/3 of all the contract tower operations in the nation, and many of these contract controllers are veterans. We need to use all the tools in our toolbox to make sure we have enough air traffic controllers to staff our country's needs. Mr. Montgomery, your written testimony mentions plans to apply for the FAA's Air Traffic Collegiate Training Initiative, ATCTI. Please expand upon this, and how will it help Louisiana Tech attract and train more air traffic controllers, and how can the bill that we recently passed, the FAA reauthorization, support these important efforts?
Thank you, sir, for the question. With the Air Traffic Controller Collegiate Training Initiative, we've just submitted the final document on that. That's a standard level. The standard level will give my aviation management airmen a pipeline to get to the FAA, and they'll get 5 weeks off of their training for that. Eventually, we'd like to grow that program into the enhanced version, and at that time, I'd need some simulators, and then I'd have to find an air traffic controller that would like to come to Ruston to teach. With that, it's making my aviation management program more valuable, and those airmen going into that, the students going in that, coming out of there, will be able to go into that process. Going into air traffic controller, it's a great program.
All right, I'm really glad to hear that, and we're going to try to mimic that around the country, including in Arizona. Sky Harbor Airport in my community is one of the busiest airports in the country, provides thousands and thousands of jobs for our region. FAA technicians in my district who work at Sky Harbor have shared with me that 2 of the 3 system support centers, which install and maintain equipment for the airport's facilities, radar, and communications, are significantly understaffed. These technicians are responsible for key elements like navigational aids, airport lighting, backup power, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning that keep our airports running. The work was done by approximately 30 people working shifts of 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, but now due to staffing shortages, this workforce has been cut by 1/3. Mr. Sparrow, your capacity as the president of the Professional Aviation Safety Specialists, give us advice. What can we do to recruit and retain more technicians critical to our system?
Congressman, thank you for the question. Well, first of all, the FAA needs to develop a workforce plan for technical operations. We're hiring technicians in the same manner we have in the 1990s and early 2000s, and it's a game of whack-a-mole. Wherever the problem seems to be the biggest, we'll hire technicians there. There's not an overall plan to make a determination of what staffing should look like going forward. To have a workforce plan would put in place a strategy to say, this is what we want to do with this very talented, skilled, educated workforce that knows how the air traffic control system in the United States works, and would effectively be money in the bank for the FAA moving forward to come up with new solutions for implementing new systems across the country. They have not gone forward with that, and by doing that, we would be able to establish how many people we need in Phoenix Sky Harbor, how many we need in Chicago, how many we need in Miami, and that's not in place right now.
And a follow-up question for you. Last month, Phoenix's extreme heat temperatures made it harder and more dangerous for planes to fly. Heat also places great strain on the ramp workers responsible for much of the behind-the-scenes work like fueling the planes and baggage handling. So, Mr. Sparrow, tell us about the impact of heat on your members, past members, and if so, what do you think we should do to address the issue as we work to recruit and retain aviation specialists?
So folks that work, thank you again for that question. Folks that work out in the field are always under heat stress. The ability for them to manage that stress is sometimes not always facilitated by the FAA. Recently, we even had to go to an arbitration to determine that the FAA had to give water to our technicians out in the field because they were unwilling to provide them with potable water, which we did win that case.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Stanton. Recognize the gentleman from South Dakota, Mr. Johnson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sparrow, I want to talk with you a little bit this morning. Of course, part of solving the challenges with our aviation workforce is making sure that we're making effective and efficient use of the resources we do have. So I want to talk a little bit about the new TSA aviation worker screening proposal. And clearly, security needs to be really important, but as you know, the new proposal would in essence put airports in charge of screening aviation workers. Airports would have to develop, implement, and operate this screening protocol for randomized physical screening of aviation workers. This would put, I think, a pretty substantial new operational obligation with substantial costs on airports. Maybe some of the big airports would be able to handle it. I'm not sure smaller airports like Rapid City, Sioux Falls, Aberdeen, Pierre, Watertown would be able to do so. I was glad to see TSA pushing back for a year their proposal to implement this. But any observations about this? It seems to me that TSA is the expert on airport screening and security. TSA should be in charge of this process rather than making, in essence, the landlords, the airports, come up with these new screening protocols.
Well, thank you for the question. I would tend to agree with you. I don't represent the TSA employees, and I'm not an expert on screening. And I would tend to agree with you that TSA should work and help make those recommendations.
Yeah, I certainly agree as well. For any of the panelists, we've talked about some of the challenges. Talk about some bright spots. I mean, what is really working well? What would we want to raise up as something that is replicatable in a broader sense?
Oh, I would love to talk about some of the bright spots because they are what brighten my day too. I mean, there's so much good news out there. I mentioned that there's a lot of connective tissue among the associations and passionate people all around the country who want to share their love for aviation and spark that interest. Women in Aviation is going to have their 10th annual Girls in Aviation Day this year. EAA has given over 2 million flights through their Young Eagles programs to young people who want to get into aviation. And the joy that you see, if you haven't been to a Young Eagles Day, and my kids have taken advantage of this a few times, when they're all lining up and they're getting into the airplane and it's their turn and they're doing rock, paper, scissors to see who gets to sit in the front and who's riding in the back, that's a formative moment. And the more we can put those together and string those together, we can capture that excitement and keep that feeling alive all the way through to where they'll become, leaders in our industry. So I see these bright spots all the time. They make me really happy when I get a chance to celebrate them.
Anybody else want to share a bright spot?
Well, I'll build on Ms. Damato's sentiments that with the uncrewed system and autonomy industry, we're opening up the opportunity to engage in aviation, either as a workforce or as a hobby in new ways that previously were unavailable given the high cost of aviation.
So what about, and I'm not talking about pilot retirement age because I just don't want to lob that grenade into this hearing room today, but what about other positions in the aviation workforce? Are we doing a good job of holding on to people on the back end of their career, making sure that they feel value so they stick around for another year or two? I mean, we could really use them, right? They know what they're doing.
I think in our industry, sir, we don't have too many people on the back end of their career since we're a very new and nascent industry, but I'll defer to my colleagues to maybe answer that question.
Congressman, I would like to weigh in on that. When it comes to staying on, especially in the FAA, a lot of employees now are looking at this and saying it's time to punch out and retiring, whereas they may be able to stay on a little longer and pass on some of the knowledge that they've obtained over the years to the younger employees that come forward. In the technical operations part of the FAA and the ATO, they don't hire anyone until that predecessor has left. So you lose 30, 35, 40 years of experience for a new employee that might have the opportunity to be mentored by that employee that has all that experience. You lose all of that, and they need to develop a process now for when they hire folks to be able to do it in advance of someone retiring.
Thanks much, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Garcia, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, and of course to all of the witnesses. who are addressing present and future challenges in the aviation sector. I proudly represent Illinois' 4th District, which includes Midway Airport, and I border on O'Hare as well. Together, these two airports generate more than $45 billion in annual economic activity and create 540,000 jobs in the region. O'Hare is the 5th busiest airport in the country and processed nearly 36 million passengers in 2023. Recognizing O'Hare's size and significance, it's alarming that a month ago there was a ground stop ordered due to the technical issue with air traffic control radar system. Mr. Sparrow, we hear a lot about air traffic controller shortages causing disruptions to the National Airspace System, or NAS. And while this is an extremely pressing issue, technicians are also understaffed. You touched on it, which poses a different set of challenges. Mr. Sparrow, can you describe what happened during the June ground stop at O'Hare and how technician staffing levels may have contributed to this incident?
Congressman, thank you for the question. I can explain what happened. So a radar feed from a long-range radar was malfunctioning. Our technicians went out to work on it, but since that feed goes into the Chicago Large TRACON and the Chicago Air Route Traffic Control Center, it goes into systems that feed out to Midway and other airports, including O'Hare Tower. They did not have on staff at the Large TRACON an employee that was skilled and trained and certified on how to exclude that radar system from the feed. Because of that, air traffic controllers are seeing multiple targets on their displays. The only solution at that particular point was to put a ground stop in place because they did not know where the aircraft were. Fortunately, we had a technician that was off duty that was called in on overtime and made it in a short period of time and came in and resolved the problem. But that problem would have been resolved if they had the right number of people with the right amount of training. And that was a conscious decision made by the agency there in Chicago to say, we don't need anyone on staff that has that training right now.
I think your testimony sheds light that we do. Thank you. It's clear that we need to invest in our aviation workforce, not only from a recruiting standpoint, but also from a quality of life standpoint. If we want to attract more workers, we need to improve working conditions. This brings me to my next point. Ms. Damato, I, like other members up here, were struck by your testimony that as a young woman pursuing a career in aviation, you were barred from training on some airplanes because of your gender. This bias culture is one of the most prominent obstacles to recruiting women and minorities into aviation. Countless examples of racial bias have created similar barriers for people of color. In your opinion, what is needed to shift this culture, and do you think that the provisions in the FAA reauthorization bill do enough to address this problem? And I'm thinking about the factor of childcare, maternity leave, the feasibility of a career in aviation while balancing raising a family, and of course, what type of support women specifically who are seeking a career in aviation will need moving forward.
Thank you for the question, and it's an honor to be a professional in aviation, but certainly a number of us who are women in aviation, we talk about these issues all of the time, and we offer each other support and mentoring to help those that have been through some of those challenges, coach some of those who are facing them now. There's some really great stuff in the FAA Reauthorization Act that addresses things like helping a new mother find time to pump her breast milk while she may be performing the roles of a pilot. There's information on the safety of uniforms and accommodations made for a woman who is pregnant and still needs to comply with uniform regulations. There's information from the Women in Aviation Advisory Board that talks about the hurdles that have to do with caregiving and being able to manage the work-life balance There are great opportunities within aviation to find your support network and to find scheduling and employers that work with your specific needs and your values. But a lot of the work that needs to be done is to understand that there are typically, men are parents too. And so if we're talking about caregivers specifically, it's wonderful to know that, schedules can be balanced so that the women who want to have a flying career don't feel like they have to stop flying because they also want to be caregivers. They just need to understand, or they need help in the accommodations for, one-day trips, or how they can schedule their trips in a way that still accommodates the priorities that are important to them. There's so much work to be done here. It's a difficult subject that the Women in Aviation Advisory Board put a lot of effort into with their 55 recommendations, and the Reauthorization Act does address a few of those. But there's work to be done, and I think that's what that permanent Women in Aviation Advisory Committee is going to help address, so that employers understand what they need to do
to
help accommodate the women.
Great, thank you, and I appreciate the indulgence, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. I recognize the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Owens, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and ranking members and the witnesses for today. Today's hearing bridges two of my assignments, both on this committee and Education and Workforce Committee. My work on both the FAA reauthorization and the College Cost Reduction Act have been in part focused on flight education provisions that assist students trying to become commercial airlines pilots. These are certified undergraduate programs for flight training. With collegiate flight training adding on an average of an additional $80,000 on top of costs of 4-year bachelor college degrees, it's understandable that the dropout rates for private pilots near 80%. Mr. Montgomery, I was impressed with your testimony in the ways that Louisiana Tech has innovated to adapt to bleak reality facing aviation's industry's recruitment of talent. This is seen in LA's and Louisiana's Tech's partnering with private aviation companies to increase flight training opportunities and pairing aviation management degrees with industry certification. This innovative approach allows students to begin working immediately upon graduation. Can you share additional strategies that the school has implemented to reduce the cost of aviation education?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. We're resource restricted in all of our aircraft. We have 13 aircraft are paid by students through flight fees. When I've seen that and dealt with that to me is unacceptable. So there's grants out there. We're going to chase them down. We're going to get those grants one way or the other. There's other ways we can expand our program, and one of those is in aviation management. With adding more students and more options for aviation management, that means more resources. That isn't more resources from added flight fees, that's more resources from just basic students paying for.
Can you speak a little bit closer to the mic?
Oh, yes, sir, I apologize. So adding more aviation management and adding more options for aviation management will, in the end, get me more resources. More resources I could turn and put back into the places we need it, specifically aircraft, drones. If we can get our mechanics going, if we can get a shop going, that'd be good. We are looking at a couple of partners with some community colleges and then also with some Louisiana Tech businesses. And if we can marry their A&P certifications with our management program, that'll make it more valuable. And that goes further with the air traffic controller standard initiative through the ATCTI and a couple other things, as well as our MBA with the aviation concentration.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Damato, my team has been working to create opportunities for students to identify interests and career paths earlier. If a college football coach can identify potential talent in students as young as 7th grade, I see no reason why aviation education programs cannot do the same. Once interests and dreams are married, students can get the head start on numerous aviation industry certifications before they even graduate from high school. Can you share any work you and others are doing to incentivize careers in aviation to get kids excited about flying or working at a much younger age?
Thank you for the question. The research that was done through the task force and the Women in Aviation Advisory Board showed that you've got 2 ages that have a high impact on getting attention, age 10 and age 18. And then that window between those ages is really critical too. The time that they're able to earn an FAA certification really starts once they hit that 15 and 16-year-old mark. So you've got to keep them interested until they're old enough to earn their first certification. What's beautiful about aviation is that age does line up with high school. There are opportunities that they have to take advantage of outside of their high school, like I did, to know that you need to go to your local airport and do your flight training. But for high schools, especially career and technical education high schools who offer aviation programs, and AOPA with their high school curriculum that's in a number of high schools around the country, there's opportunities to provide that education formally through the 4 years that you're in high school, to perhaps get the written test out of the way, to earn some stackable credentials for the technicians, maybe a specialty in, or as a module in sheet metal fabrication or safety wiring, so that you're gaining these skills that allow you to find employment and apprenticeship in high school or immediately after high school, that then allow you to do those jobs while you're earning the rest of the certifications that you can receive formal education for. It's incredibly important, and we've got to take advantage of that time window.
We're looking on education being a little bit more innovative, and we look forward to having some conversations with you about this, because the earlier our kids get exposed, the sooner they can get out and get their careers going and build a dream. So we look forward to spending more time talking about these issues. Thank you so much. Now yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Owens. Recognize the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. DeLuzio, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'll start by commending the work done by many on this subcommittee and the full committee on the FAA Reauthorization Act. I think really important bill, bipartisan bill that tackles many of the issues we're talking about today. One of the greatest challenges, again, one we've heard about today facing aviation is issues around workforce, pilots, flight attendants, mechanics, air traffic controllers, you name it. The FAA reauthorization has some good provisions to tackle some of those issues, and we've heard about some today. I'll start with one issue that I've heard about from my district. An airline that flies in and out of Pittsburgh International in my district has been using non-compete clauses to keep their pilots from going to bigger commercial carriers. Ms. Damato, I'll ask you, do you think it's more important for us to try to grow workforce, in this case pilots, through programs like Joint Aviation Employment Training Working Group or the pilot program to provide veterans of pilot training services, just citing some examples, that are included in the reauthorization, rather than companies relying on non-competes to keep folks from seeking other opportunities?
Thank you for the question. We need to recruit pilots and technicians and all the other positions that exist in aviation from everywhere we can get them. So the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024 introduces a lot of opportunities to attract veterans, separating military to aviation. It talks about high schoolers and how to attract them as well if they don't want to pursue a formal collegiate or trade school education. So there's opportunities everywhere. I think we want to leave no stone unturned. What we need to understand is what does that demand look like, and how do we find someone their best aptitude and what it is they want to do. I only ever wanted to be a 121 airline pilot, but as you can see, I decided to do something different with my aviation management and flight degree, and I have 5 college students, graduates of collegiate aviation programs, who work at NBAA sitting behind me, who may, some of them are pilots and some of them aren't, but they decided that aviation management was something that they're really interested in, and they've all developed unique career paths that you can't read about in a textbook or follow a flight plan for. So it's really cool that we should get anybody anywhere for anything they want to do in this profession.
Good, thank you. Mr. Sparrow, I'll come to you. Your members perform a bunch of tasks: critical maintenance, repair of FAA systems, equipment, operation of those systems, and the rest. What would the increase for facilities and equipment in the FAA's budget request mean for your folks and the folks you work with?
Congressman, thank you for that question. So just to get started and to hire at least 800 technicians within the next year and get them trained would probably cost the agency, in conversations that I've had with folks over there at 800 Independence Avenue, about $90 million.
Substantial.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Look, on the topic of workforce issues, again, airport in my district, Pittsburgh International, one of its advantages is that nearby we have the Pittsburgh Institute for Aeronautics, a very widely respected aviation mechanics school. Students there complete a 20-month course, become certified to work on commercial aircraft. Many go into good-paying, solid jobs, particularly at Pittsburgh International, which is about an hour away. The airport itself, like many, though, is not a training center, and so there's some limitations. Mr. Montgomery, come to you. What changes do you think, if any, are needed to expand these aeronautical job training programs on airport, off airport, some mix of presence on both?
Thank you, sir. Opportunities, any. I mean, aviation's such a great experience. It's such a great industry. The more internships I have out there, the better airmen I can produce. We get them to go all over the place, like Ms. Damato's saying, is that when they go out there and they get the experience, they come back with that experience, it's just so different. You could see them just lighting up because they're taking all that education and turning it into a career. And they love and passion for it. It's great. So anything we can do and anything out there that could allow me the opportunity to just get those guys into the airports or share experience with them would be loved.
In the little bit of time we have left, do you think the proximity and getting access to seeing real operations at airports is an important part of this training and the avenues you want to see expand?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Okay, very good. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Collins, recognized 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I sit here, I have more and more questions, so I'm going to try to speed up. For somebody from the South, it's a little tough. I'm going to open this up to everybody, though, my first question, because I was recently at a private schooling where you could get your general aviation, your private pilot license. And the young man there that owns the place has been trying to get his DPE for 3 years now. He's had his application in. And in the state of Georgia, we only have 31 DPEs. And I know that the ranking member mentioned that the FAA has addressed a little bit of that, but that's for oversight and coordinating of our current DPEs. So I guess my question is, what are y'all seeing that needs to be done to increase the DPEs? And are you seeing people or hearing of people like I heard that have their application in to become a DPE and are still waiting to become a DPE or a designated pilot examiner?
I can speak about that. Thank you for the question. I can speak about that from the parent standpoint and the struggles that I see especially happening in the summertime before students need to be starting their collegiate aviation programs. There's an amazing Facebook group called Raising Aviation Teens, started by parents, and it's just a bunch of parents who are not aviation professionals trying to share tips. As recently as last week, someone in my region was desperate to find a DPE for their child who's starting a 4-year program in the fall who has to go in with their private pilot's certificate. And they can't find anybody within the tri-state area, and they went to this group to see if anybody could recommend somebody. They have to start in May to find somebody by August. And those are some target-rich areas of DPE. So the concern is that geographically, there's a lot of places in the country that don't even have that coverage, and you've got to travel to go and find an examiner. And so it is a real concern, especially when that's something that could cause somebody to give up and try something else if they just really can't get to accomplish what they need to accomplish.
Well, and I think it contributes to the bottleneck of what we're talking about this morning. I mean, if you God forbid, you get COVID and you have to reschedule your check ride, you may be looking at 6 months, or who knows when. And so, you know, when I'm visiting in my district and I hear people, well, you know, I've had my application in, I've got thousands of hours. I own a private company that teaches people to fly, and for 3 years I still haven't gotten my certification. I didn't know if y'all had been hearing that. But Ms. Damato, I also wanted to make a comment. I know you and Congressman Westman were talking about college and how you were routed to college for your pilot's license. And as someone who is big on technical schools and what I see is a culture, and it has been a culture of everybody that graduates from high school has got to go to college. You got to go to college. I would encourage you, as you're looking at this one-stop shop, there are so many different options, from the gentleman on the end who's got technical school to private schools that are able to give you that same training to become a pilot, and you don't have to go to college to get that degree and to go to work in general aviation or commercial aviation. So I don't know if that's something that you have thought about or pushing.
Yes, sir. Oh, we know not every student wants to go from high school into a collegiate program. That's the importance of some of the things they can earn in high school that can make them immediately employable. If they're able to earn some of those credentials that they can then stack and turn into something like an A&P, which would be amazing for them.
Right.
The trade schools are amazing. A collegiate program for some is what they seek. My son goes to a career and technical education high school in New Jersey. They don't offer aviation, but they offer automotive. And he's already earned every certification from ASE for the certification for auto mechanics. So seeing something like that for aviation would be incredible.
Well, good. The last thing I wanted to talk about was a bill that I introduced in Congress this year, or last year rather, and it's the Aviation Workforce Development Act, and it deals with 529s, where you can use your own savings plan, educational savings plan, to send your student to become a commercial airline pilot or a aviation mechanic. And I am proud to say that the House Ways and Means marked that up with their other 529s this week and passed that out. And I just wanted to, well, I don't have any time left, but I want to encourage you. That is H.R. 8915 now. It's the Education and Workforce Freedom Act. It's going to come up for the full House for a vote. I encourage you to get out there and make sure people know about it and encourage their representative to vote for it. And when we get it over to the Senate, make them pass it. I mean, they got about 160 of our bills sitting over there that they're not taking up. This would have an immediate effect on people's availability to get their child or their young person into this career quickly and help eliminate this problem immediately. Thank you, and Mr. Chair, you're back.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Recognize the gentle lady from Michigan, Ms. Schulten, 5 minutes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much to all of our witnesses for being here today. We have a robust aviation talent pipeline in West Michigan and a strong aviation manufacturing base as well. West Michigan Aviation Academy is in my district, a great training ground for future pilots and aviation mechanics. A proud co-sponsor of Mr. Collins' bill, as well as the Expand Aviation Workforce Development Act to reauthorize increased funding for critical pilot and aviation maintenance technician workforce development programs. I'm thrilled that the FY 2024 FAA reauthorization builds on the Aviation Workforce Development Grants Program success. There is so much more that needs to be done. Ms. Damato, how can such early investments in educating and recruiting aviation talent ease barriers to entering the industry and alleviate bottlenecks? And additionally, how can Congress better support flexibilities, spoiler alert, to credential career and technical education instructors, including high school aviation teachers?
Thank you for that question. We have a very robust workforce effort through our Michigan Business Aviation Association. I know they do a lot in that region, and we've gotten to participate in a lot of those efforts that they do to get students interested. And that's really the key. We've got this opportunity where we know where our kids are from kindergarten to 12th grade. They have a curriculum on all the STEM subjects, and there are opportunities to weave aviation into all of the existing curriculum. And that's a recommendation from the Youth Task Force that's reflected in the Reauthorization Act. It's critical. I think that's something that FAA's Aviation and Space Education Program can help to develop that curricula to a national standard and get that into our schools. That's how you spark the interest and keep the conversation with those practical, scenario-driven examples that make them want to turn that into a career as they complete their education.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And listening to you talk about your son in vocational training programs, I've got 2 young sons. They're not quite there yet, but making sure that we have the type of environment, culturally, socially, that could encourage students to pursue these trades. It strikes me, no matter the amount of funding that we have there, while we have barriers in society that prevent our students from considering this as a viable career path, we're never going to make progress. That's why I introduced a bill called the Honoring Vocational Education Act, which changes the way the United States Census tracks higher education. Currently you only get to check that box for higher education if you've completed a college degree. I think it should also include highly skilled, highly educational vocational training programs like this. Again, I'll repeat Mr. Collins' request. Make sure people are paying attention to this. We've got over 65 bipartisan co-sponsors on it. It's a fantastic bill. Mr. Sparrow, on that note, how can we boost awareness of these non-traditional forms of education to further build the aviation workforce pipeline and enable folks to earn good-paying, highly skilled jobs?
Thank you for the question. So I'll kind of break this up a little bit. In the Aircraft Certification, Safety, and Accountability Act, this committee authorized $81 million to bring on aviation safety inspectors and engineers and other folks that human factor specialists. That was never funded on the other side. So jobs that are available should be available by the agency were never funded. They don't have the money and they never brought it forth. And the technical operations side of the world, they have brought forth a program that brings on interns now. And it was a good concept. It is a good concept. I met one last week, 2 weeks ago in Chicago, as a matter of fact, and that went through the program. Once he graduated school, they brought him on, hired him as an airway transportation system specialist there at Chicago Center. So there are opportunities that should be expanded within the FAA to provide that to more students, to bring them on through the pipeline, be able to expose them to that environment and make a determination that that's for them, or maybe they decide it isn't for them. But there's certain, right now they're only doing a small number of them, 150 or so across the country. They hire them on as students. They work around their schedules, but they could expand it to allow them to go to more places around the country. I had one a few weeks ago. I spoke to in Oklahoma City, highly skilled, ready to go. He's in an aviation program. He wanted to get picked up in this program, but they would only bring him on in Fort Worth, not in Oklahoma City. So that didn't really work for the young man, and that's an opportunity missed, in my opinion.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Schulten. Gentlemen, I skipped over. Mr. Stauber from Minnesota, recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So in my previous life, I served 23 years as a law enforcement officer in the city of Duluth, and I saw the technology within the drones become increasingly needed, and I just saw how they could save lives, help officers de-escalate, find lost people, now we're seeing drones being able to be flown out at a high rate of speed to people that may be having difficulty in the water. I think that's that next public safety step, and I saw it in law enforcement. I mean, we see it in the fire service. Sometimes those drones can get up and look at from the top of the building, see the smoke earlier, or look inside a collapsed building. And Mr. Robbins, as president and CEO of the Association of Uncrewed Vehicle Systems International, I am wondering if you can speak to some of the innovative ways drones are enhancing public safety operations from your standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely, sir, and thank you very much for that question. I actually had the opportunity to testify before your colleagues in the Homeland Security Committee on this exact topic just a few weeks ago. And it is definitely a good news story. There's no doubt that drones are saving lives in public safety, both for the officers in public safety by keeping them out of harm's way, or giving them situational awareness as they arrive to a scene, whether that is an incident or there's a fire, so they have better intelligence to make informed decisions. It also, as you noted, is allowing emergency response to be much more effective, whether that's search and rescue, or delivering an AED or antivenom for a snake bite, or as you mentioned, life-saving devices for those that may be caught in a riptide or something. So time and time again, we've seen public safety agencies being incredibly innovative with their use of advanced technology, including drones, and getting that out there into the community. And this is definitely a very positive use case. And it's only going to get better as the FAA regulations to allow for operations to occur beyond visual line of sight are expanded. Yes. And once that framework is in place, drone as a first responder is really going to take off, which is a program where drones are pre-positioned around a community, and when a 911 call comes in, that drone is the first dispatched, and it is on site typically under 90 seconds in the communities that have it now. And again, providing that situational awareness back to the officers who are typically arriving after the drone's already been on site. Once we get that regulatory framework in place from the FAA, this is going to be an even better story to tell.
I think that we as a nation really, and public servants have to really push that. I mean, there's a situation in my hometown where a young girl there's an attempted kidnapping. It was in an area of town where we could have had the drone up and description of the suspect. You could follow that suspect, whatever building. That is so incredibly important that we use this technology. As you said, rightfully so. It's going to save going to save the safety of the officer and his or her life, but also the suspect and other bystanders. We have such the capability, and I'm so excited about the future of what that capability can provide for our communities. So my next question is, what is the status of drone manufacturing in the United States? And do we have the workforce to complement the clearly increasing demand for this technology?
That's a great question, sir. The drone workforce in the U.S. right now for manufacturing is growing. Candidly, it's a small industry at the moment, in large part because for the last decade, the People's Republic of China has dominated this industry, and most of the drones in service right now in the U.S. have been imported below market rates from China. They've flooded the market with cheap, unsecured drones. This is a huge problem and one that the United States Congress is seeking to address. There's a bill before Congress right now called the Drones as First Responders Act, which would provide higher tariffs on Chinese drones and then funnel the money from the existing and the new tariffs into a grant program so that first responders, critical infrastructure owner and operators, and agriculture could purchase new, secure drones. And that would certainly help enhance the U.S. workforce in terms of drone manufacturing by creating that demand that isn't always there right now because many operators are defaulting to the cheap Chinese drones.
Well, I agree. I absolutely agree with you. One of the company that I won't name in the United States makes drones in the United States for law enforcement that can actually smash through windows. And
Yes,
you know what company I'm talking about. But can you imagine being able to get a suspect in a murder smashed through and get a visual of the inside of the residence for the tactical team to enter?
SWAT teams love it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So I'm really happy. I think you're on the cusp of things, and I think that by the end of your career, you're going to say, look how far we've grown, and for us and members of Congress to do the same. So, Mr. Chair, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stauber. Gentle lady right here representing District of Columbia. Ms. Norton's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Damato, in your testimony, you emphasized the need for a diverse aviation workforce, including the implementation of recommendations from the Women in Aviation Advisory Board to address the significant underrepresentation of women in aviation, who make up just 8.3% of the aircraft pilots and flight engineers and only 4.3% of aircraft mechanics and service technicians. One of the barriers to entry for women you mentioned is discrimination in flight school. How can Congress and the FAA ensure a more inclusive environment in flight school and the aviation workforce?
Thank you for that question. What's really important for any training environment, whether it's at the local airport, it's part of a flight school, a collegiate program, a trade school, is being able to find the allyship. Of course, culture starts at the top with leadership, so it needs to be a top-down approach. But what really works for anybody who feels that they are underrepresented or having a hard time finding their allies are the important affinity groups that exist at a number of these places. So at a flight school, you'll typically find a Women in Aviation chapter, an OBAP chapter, an NGPA chapter. It's wonderful for the students to join these groups either as a member of them or as an ally to them and find that they can make changes from within. I went to a four-year university and had a wonderful aviation experience at my flight school. I didn't experience anything there that made me feel like an other. Those are stories that I have been hearing less and less about now as enrollment in aviation flight schools has been increasing. But what does happen is that women don't convert as much as men from student pilot to private pilot and on to commercial. And we find that that is because they may experience bias or harassment or feeling like they're not welcome. So being able to find these affinity groups for support to have leadership address the issues is really important. The Women in Aviation Council committee that is cited in the FAA Reauthorization Act is going to be critical to that. That's an opportunity where we can have this group that sunset in 2022 and leaders in our industry roll their sleeves back up and address all of the hurdles that were identified and work with industry and FAA and Congress to address them.
Thank you. Another significant barrier you mentioned is cost. I am pleased that the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024 establishes a pilot program to provide grants to flight schools for the flight training and education of veterans. Do you think similar financial assistance programs targeted towards women, youth, and minorities could have a positive effect on the diversity of our aviation workforce?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that question. Absolutely. The financial hurdle is real. It keeps people from turning a passion for aviation into reality. And the struggle to find access to the funding that they need to invest in themselves, regardless of what path in aviation they've chosen, is something that gets them to either be successful in their quest through scholarship, access to grant money, loans at varying interest rates, or it has them find that it's just not going to be possible for them and they go and look at another industry. So those are going to be hugely impactful if we're able to increase funding for anybody who feels like aviation is the place for them. Then we need to make sure we can make this the place for them.
Mr. Sparrow, in your testimony, you also cite a lack of sufficient outreach to women, as well as minorities and youth within the aviation sector. Another provision I was glad to see included in the FAA bill is a $60 million investment into programs that will strengthen recruitment and retention of aviation workers, including $12 million for the Willow Brown Aviation Education Program, which focuses on advancing aviation opportunities in underserved areas. Besides increases outreach and education, how else can Congress and the FAA address the underrepresentation of women, minorities, and youth in the aviation workforce?
Congresswoman, thank you for the question. Recently, I attended an annual conference for an FAA Employees Association group called the Technical Women's Organization. And although it was well attended by some of the senior leadership on the air traffic organization side, I didn't see much of a presence from the aviation safety line of business, which could lean in very much and help begin to lean into these programs that help recruit women into these types of jobs. There's only about 4% of the aviation safety inspectors right now that are women, and most of them look more like me. And that's really not an acceptable way to continue on and ignore it. They're not really, and from my perspective, trying to make a difference when it comes to that. So the agency could certainly do more of that and get involved in many more of the programs that some of the employee associations are currently working.
Thank you, Mr. Sparrow. Recognize the gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Mann, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, thank you for having this important hearing this morning. Thank you all for being here. As part of the FAA reauthorization we passed this year, vital policy solutions were included to bolster our nation's aviation workforce. I was proud to work with many people on this committee to ensure that several of these provisions were included in the final bill, such as Section 625, workforce expansion, air traffic controller training initiatives, and strengthening the pilot and certification workforces. Our nation's economy relies on aviation, whether that be commercial, cargo, defense operations, agriculture. That certainly is true in my state of Kansas. Any hindrance to this system can negatively affect our supply chains, livelihood, and our national security, which is why having strong workforce of these key professions within our aviation industry is the utmost importance. I applaud Chairman Graves and Graves, sound like a law firm, by the way, of Graves and Graves, for working to create a reauthorization bill that aims at strengthening these professions. First question for you, Ms. Damato. In Kansas, there are several schools and programs that offer certifications and degrees in aviation workforce professions. To keep up with the demand of commercial and cargo air operations in Kansas and around the country, it's imperative that these programs continue to grow and succeed in producing the next generation of aviation workforce. Do the schools and programs that you see have the proper tools, resources, and infrastructure needed to successfully train our workforce? And how can this Congress ensure the FAA continues to provide your members with the resources needed to improve these programs?
Thank you for that question, and absolutely. Our aviation youth, those that are attracted to the collegiate programs, have so many different offerings in front of them. It's not like there's just one choice. And so they are consumers, they're shopping around, and they're comparing them for a number of different attributes. The schools themselves need to stay competitive, and the way that they're going to be able to do that is having access to fleets that are equipped with the most modern technology that the students will be using when they complete the program. If they have a maintenance program or an air traffic control program, the experience of instructors that are needed is something that's a concern. But when you lose that experience and that mentoring opportunity, you lose some of the depth there too. So it's both. I know Mr. Montgomery will talk about this, and he did in his testimony. A lot of it I know has to do with financial, but also that educational knowledge that we can't lose from those experts in our field that we need to come back and spend time with the students.
Yeah, and a critical time, in my view, is the aviation workforce has changed a lot in the last 5 years. When you look at what COVID did, you look at the impacts, retirements, it's just times are changing, and it's important to recognize these changes to make sure the industry is growing and changing. Ms. Damato, what new trends are you seeing in workers' needs across the industry, and what initiatives have your members implemented to address these changes? I mean, what are you seeing out there that you see that's really working?
So at NBAA, we have this incredible tapestry of young professionals. They're called the Yo Pros. They were here actually 2 weeks ago for a DC fly-in. A few of them are sitting behind me. They come from all over the country and from all of our members, and they work in 9 or 10 or more different categories where they would find themselves professionals in aviation. They let us know what's important to them is community, having that ability to connect with each other, even if they're not in the same geographical place. They want to be advocates for themselves and where they are locally and regionally, but also taking into account how they can change the national landscape. And of course, just like anybody, they enjoy a really great work-life balance, and they want to be able to have that lifestyle that they get to carve out for themselves as individuals versus feeling they're part of a prescriptive plan. And I think our members have been learning from them and have been adapting as much as they can to make that the reality to retain them.
Oh, that's great. Last question for you, Mr. Montgomery. Commercial air travel has been, increasing greatly. That's a great thing. The need for skilled workforce is imperative to keeping air travel efficient and successful as the demand hopefully continues to grow. What are your plans to add additional programs at your school or plans to grow current programs at your school?
Thank you, sir, for that question. We plan to expand into unmanned aerial vehicles, both large and small. And then we want to start up a ANP program and air traffic control through the ATCTI program. And then from there, we want to acquire more aircraft because we're turning away too many students that want to be an airman.
That's great. Well, thank you all for being there. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. I recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I thank the witnesses for your testimony today. And the U.S. aviation industry will experience significant growth, contributing an estimated $1.37 trillion to our GDP. The $60 million annual investment under the Federal Aviation Administration Reauthorization Act of 2024 is our bipartisan commitment to meeting this growing demand. As we prepare for the surge in aviation in Georgia, Delta Airlines is leading the way by providing equitable opportunities for everyone to contribute and benefit from the industry's prosperity. They lead the charge as the nation's most significant aviation industry employer. We must support airlines like Delta through initiatives like the Willa Brown Aviation Education Program to close representation gaps. This legislation allocates $48 million through fiscal year 2028, with 20% of it set aside from the FAA's workforce development programs for recruitment initiatives in lower income and underserved communities. Mr. Sparrow, in your testimony, you highlight the ongoing challenges of recruiting and retaining sufficient aviation talent within the FAA. These challenges include competitive salary disparities with the private sector, lengthy hiring processes, and inadequate staffing models that fail to accurately predict workforce needs. How do these workforce challenges, particularly recruitment and retention, impact day-to-day aviation operations and safety within the U.S. Airspace system?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. So in the aviation safety inspector world over in AVS, this manifests itself in inspectors having to manage multiple certificates for various in what we'll call the charter airline world, the 135 operators. We'll have inspectors that have to manage many of them in some locations. Some of those certificates have not yet been assigned to anyone because of the shortage of inspectors. I was on a call last night with some folks that talked about how 90 of those certificates in their office have not been assigned to anyone because of the attrition in their office, where they don't have enough people to do the work. You take this into the technical operations world, and we've got mission support as well. We have procedures specialists, folks that draw maps for air traffic control, develop procedures. There's not enough of them either. We lose people and we're not able to replace them, and we don't have that pipeline coming in. We're not prepared to replace someone when they leave, as I pointed out earlier. In technical operations, that attrition has gone on for almost 10 years, and it manifests itself in situations like we talked about in Chicago, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Every day that we're not working on systems across the national airspace system for air traffic control is another day we may not have uncovered a problem.
Thank you. Can you elaborate on specific provisions of this FAA Act that are particularly crucial for addressing the staffing challenges?
Indeed, thank you. So, as I mentioned earlier, I squeezed this one in a little earlier, but in the Aircraft Certification, Safety, and Accountability Act, this committee authorized $26 million over, or $27 million consecutively over 3 years. That money was never appropriated, and that was to recruit and retain aviation safety inspectors. So all the good intentions of creating all these authorizations, if they're not funded, the agency's not going to hire the people.
Thank you. Ms. Damato, in your testimony, you highlighted the expansion of aviation workforce development grants and initiatives like the Willa Brown Aviation Education Program to support underrepresented populations. Can you elaborate on how these programs will address the specific barriers faced by women and economically disadvantaged individuals seeking careers in aviation?
Yes, thank you for the question. That 20% is going to be critical. We need to get to the HBCUs, the minority-serving institutions, and those that are interested in aviation but aren't currently getting access to the grants or aren't able to get as much allocated towards them as they'd like. It's going to be impactful for them. As we all know, we need so many people to enter aviation to be able to keep up with the demands for all of the jobs that exist now and that will exist. And we have to engage the other 50% of the population through women and all of the minorities that see aviation as something that aviation is for everyone. And so making opportunities for everyone to be able to be in aviation is critical, and that's reflected in the great work of the Reauthorization Act of 2024, and specifically calling out the Willa Brown Education Program as one of those.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Molinaro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate all of you testifying today. Mr. Sparrow, I'm glad you're at the table. It was about a week ago in this very room. We had a hearing where we were talking about workforce shortages, and a gentleman from a think tank suggested that the only way we could expand access and broaden access to a workforce was to undermine labor protections and to ignore collective bargaining agreements. I assure you that I had opposed that theory last week and would continue to do so this week. I don't have a question for you just yet, but your testimony is helpful. I come to this conversation having spent the last 12 years as a county executive in New York State, where I managed the busiest general aviation airport in the state of New York, 48,000 takeoff and landings each year. But beyond that, we developed, in partnership with a community college, our community college, a pilot and A&P degree program, but also a mechatronics certification program. So I know at least the demand that we have to educate this next workforce. And despite this country's capacity to expand our aviation sector, we know that the bottlenecks and the lack of access to workforce is one of our, if not the greatest challenge in doing so. So each of you obviously comes to this with a degree of experience. When I came here to Congress, we wanted to work to effectively ensure adequate funding for aviation workforce development programs. I introduced the AIR Act, the Aviation Investment and Recruitment Act, and I was thrilled and thankful to Chair Mengraves for ensuring that this bill is embedded in the FAA reauthorization and further doubles the FAA's workforce development grant programs by, again, another $20 million. I'm going to start, I think, Ms. Damato and Mr. Montgomery. Can you just speak broadly, if you'd like, or to the importance of the increased funding to these grant programs and how we might better make use of those grant programs from your perspective?
Yeah, I know Mr. Montgomery talks about this as well. I see it as a collegiate aviator and as a parent of a collegiate aviator. You want to make sure that your students have access to modern fleets, that they're able to be maintained in a way that doesn't take them offline, and you have more students than you have access to airplanes. Same thing with the scheduling. We can't control the weather, but knowing that the airplanes are ready and able to fly, that they're well maintained, the equipment is working, and that you have enough instructors who are able to teach your students is really important. If any of those things go away, again, we can't control the weather, but everything else, that leads you into a position where you've got students who've paid money to consume a product that they're not able to access. And so this funding could allow for an increase in the number of those concerns to change that landscape.
Thank you for that. Mr. Montgomery, I guess maybe more specifically, how might these dollars broaden and widen your programming?
Thank you, sir. If we can get the funding, we're going to use that in aircraft. We're going to use that in equipment. What that does is it takes my hourly rate and drops it. The further down I could push it, the more Americans I could serve. Right now, there's so many that can't afford flight because every maintenance, lease, and insurance is in that flight hour. With those grants, we'll be able to take that down, open up the doors, buy more aircraft. We'll be able to service better.
Yeah, when we launched our program, it was oversubscribed the semester we started. Mr. Robbins, as you likely know, I worked hard to secure the Future of Aviation Act into law. Thankfully, a bill I drafted to allow federal dollars to be used for airports to build out advanced air mobility infrastructures such as eVTOL stations in regional airports like the ones I represent in upstate New York. Advanced aviation is a critical opportunity to grow capacity, and I'm grateful that we were able to include this in the FAA reauthorization. Can you just speak to the importance of ensuring more employees, enough employees, and greater training programming to allow for this technology to build out in a more timely fashion?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, and thank you for your leadership, sir, and getting that provision in the FAA reauthorization bill. There's no doubt that the electric vertical takeoff and lift and broader advanced air mobility industry that is emerging in the U.S. right now, and Congress has expressed a desire for the U.S. to be the world leader in, is going to open up significant economic opportunities to areas like yours and everyone along the committees by opening up infrastructure that maybe is underutilized or not being utilized at all right now to be a place where aircraft can take off and land that is disconnected from traditional legacy aviation centers. There's tremendous workforce opportunities associated with expanding mobility. And there's also tremendous opportunities with all of the jobs that come along with that, both the core jobs in aviation, whether it's as pilots or flight operators or mechanics or manufacturers, but also the second and third order effects of jobs that open up when advanced air mobility enters into a underserved region. Thank you, sir.
Advanced air mobility is a great opportunity to broaden apprenticeship programming as well. So thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Molinaro. Gentleman from California, Mr. Desaulnier is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just say, you look healthier and happier recently. I don't know what's changed in your life, but I wish no, I'm not going to do the same thing. But I have two comments, or questions, I should say, and I'll put them in one package, and I'd like Mr. Sparrow to start, and maybe Mr. Damato to make any comments. The first comment is based on your reference to human factors. I've spent a lot of time on this. For flight controllers at SFO, I'm from the Bay Area. After the near miss years ago, we almost had a huge aviation disaster. And learning best practices. And at the national labs, they've done a lot of this on nuclear risk assessments and making sure that all this new technology also has the support of human factors. How we train people while they're being trained technically for all this great innovation, which we have to be careful about as a member from the Bay Area, not to be oversold, that this technology sometimes is a little bit oversold, but how do we make sure that the human factors are incorporated as we get young people to go into fields, whether it's a pilot, an air traffic controller, particularly where it's a challenge in metropolitan areas like San Francisco, where the costs don't always match the benefits because of the cost in the area. That's the first question generally. And secondarily, we worked on programs again in the Bay Area when we in California had put so much money and success in the UC CSU system and the community college system in college degrees, master's degrees, but we had to go back in and rebuild our career tech. And one of our real successes was bipartisan effort with then Governor Schwarzenegger. I was the chair of the Senate Labor Committee, to do academies. So in my old district in Richmond, California, high unemployment rate, lots of poverty. We started with a small academy that was affiliated, so you get apprenticeship credits, young kids in high school with the building trades in California. And then they went right to school, in this instance, in refineries and chemical plants in Northern California. It's been such a success at Kennedy High School in Richmond, it now has 850 kids in the program. So the two questions are, how do human factors and new technology, how do we prepare for that to make sure people being trained properly with human factors? And then secondarily, how do we get more academies like this, to particularly get low-income communities where the unemployment rate is higher, to partner with the trades, the unions, or with businesses and or first development boards? I've taken up half of my time with the two questions.
So if you'd like me to speak to human factors. Any new systems that go out there, any new programs, airplanes, whatever it might be, you have to collect data. You have to have enough information to be able to make informed decisions. You have to have people that understand the work, people that do that sort of thing, to be able to depend upon them to tell you what works and what doesn't work. And and I'm not a human factors expert, but there's a lot of science that goes into it, and that investment needs to be made on the front end. When it comes to the FAA and when it comes to some of the things that we work on in the technical operations world, where some of those human factors don't come into play, and on the back end we wind up going through voluntary safety reporting programs to say this isn't right, that isn't right, and now we have to mitigate those on the back end. The idea behind a good human factors program is it mitigates those problems on the front end and doesn't cause it later on where employees have to report it, and then go through a process that sometimes they get a lot of pushback because a lot of money's been invested in something that now people are complaining about and say it doesn't work. So that causes a lot of difficulty. But to be able to be involved in those things for us as a labor union on the front end would be very, very important.
Thanks for that. I'm not a human factors expert. I don't know that I have a comment for you now. I'd be happy to get back to you on that. But regarding the collaboration and what can happen, the Youth Task Force recommendation was adopted into the FAA Reauthorization Act for that national council made up of the 9 regional councils that the FAA has already divided into 9 regions. That's Aviation, Space, and Education Office, AVSED. Those regional program analysts know their regions the best. They know where the underserved areas are and what deserts exist around them where there could be some great opportunity. Are there employers in the area that would want to partner with the students for apprenticeships or pre-apprenticeships? It's a critically important, and I think the work of the National Strategic Plan for Aviation Workforce Development that's specified in the bill is what needs to happen to take this to the next level.
Nice job. It's like we rehearsed this, but you did very well.
Not at all.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. I appreciate it. The gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Yocum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. This is the first aviation subcommittee hearing since the FAA reauthorization became law. So I first want to thank the chairman, the ranking member, the staff, and everyone who has put such hard work to get a strong, collaborative, bipartisan bill to the president's desk. And though that journey may have seemed long between all the hearings, the markups, the delays, and the other body, the president's signature is really just the beginning. Now we need to make sure that the bill is implemented correctly and in a timely manner, while in the meantime continuing to explore and grapple with some of the foundational questions impacting our aviation industry. This hearing speaks to both of these goals. The FAA reauthorization included important investments in the aviation workforce that we want to see implemented. But there are also still a number of issues impacting the aviation workforce that warrant continued examination. Mr. Robbins, the FAA reauthorization requires the FAA to issue a notice of proposed rulemaking on beyond visual line of sight regulations by September. Can you please speak to the importance of the FAA delivering this on time, both for the industry and for the workforce?
Yes, thank you for that question, Congressman Yocum, and we appreciate your leadership on this issue. The bill, as you mentioned, the reauthorization bill, gave the FAA 4 months to publish the notice of proposed rulemaking for beyond visual line of sight. So it's a draft rule. So we're looking at September 16th in order to meet that deadline. And we certainly encourage this committee to continue its oversight and hold the FAA accountable to that deadline. The FAA then has 16 months after issuing that rule to then issue the final rule. Our industry is ready to go. The technology is there. It's been proven in areas where the FAA has allowed operations to emerge using waivers and exemptions from the rule. But without the rule there, it continues to be incremental process and incremental progress. And much of the country, as a result, is not seeing the benefit of drones, whether it's, as we was discussing with your colleague, for public safety, or whether it's for infrastructure inspection, or other operations like drone delivery. There are lots of workforce opportunities, and this is a great opportunity for the U.S. to set the record again as the leader in aviation safety by getting this rule right. So we're ready to work with FAA to get this done, and we ask that the draft rule come out by that September 16th deadline. And it's a draft, so let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, because then we're going to have 16 months for everyone to comment on it and then issue that final rule.
Very good, thank you. And also, Mr. Robbins, the FAA reauthorization additionally directed the FAA to establish a drone education and training grant program to make grants available to educational institutions for workforce training on small unmanned aerial aircraft systems. How important will grant programs like this be in getting people interested in a career in aviation?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Congressman. Section 913 is a great opportunity for Congress to provide grants to universities to build programs that are desperately needed to build the workforce, both for the UAS industry and the drone industry, but also for the FAA to recruit from, to bring in the needed talent to help ensure that they have the expertise on UAS integration. So it's a win-win for industry, and it's a win-win for the FAA. Unfortunately, based on the draft appropriations bill so far, we've seen that while you have authorized, that program has not yet been funded, and we're hopeful that that is something that's corrected as the appropriations process continues. Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you. And Ms. Damato, do you agree with the premise that, as some groups claim, there is no pilot shortage?
I know that we have a number of jobs we need to fill in this industry and a number of jobs that we don't even have a harness around how many we're going to need as we move forward with new technology. We need anyone who's interested in aviation to pursue that career path now, and we'll help you find your why. I went to pilot training. I only wanted to be a 121 pilot. Turns out after graduation and after flight instructing, I found there was an incredible opportunity for me in business aviation, and I followed that path. But we need to bring these pilots, technicians, everybody else in, and then figure out what the careers are gonna look like. My collegiate aviator right now, I have no idea what the landscape will look like for him when he graduates, but I know there's gonna be a ton of opportunities for him if he works hard and makes the right connections.
Great, thank you for that. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I appreciate that. Recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Menendez, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses for their testimony this morning. I'm proud to have worked with my fellow members of this committee to pass the bipartisan FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024, which contains many provisions that are aimed at addressing our aviation workforce needs. We are hearing about workforce shortages across all sectors, but in the aviation industry, workforce shortages have serious implications, not just for the flying experience, but for our safety. In New Jersey's 8th Congressional District, flyers traveling to and from the New York, New Jersey area are experiencing the impacts of the National Air Traffic Controller shortage. Just last week, the FAA slowed flights in and out of Newark Liberty Airport in our district. At one point, there were 40 aircraft stuck, waiting to depart on an otherwise clear evening. These delays are just the beginning of reduced service and delays that are expected to impact our airspace for the rest of the summer. Mr. Montgomery, your testimony notes that Louisiana Tech University is focusing on addressing the pressing issues in the aviation industry, including providing training to air traffic controllers. Do you see any recurring barriers to participation in air traffic controller training, and how have you addressed these barriers?
The barriers to the training, from our perspective, would be more about the simulators and actually having one of those professionals come and teach at our location. At this time, I don't have the expertise of an air traffic controller on hand, but I do have enough to get through the standard processes. So
Let me ask you a question with respect to something that the FAA is currently standing up. It's an enhanced collegiate training initiative program that will allow qualified graduates from colleges that participate to bypass initial training at the FAA Training Academy in Oklahoma City. The Training Academy can currently handle about 1,800 trainees per year, which has been a choke point in the process to place new air traffic controller trainees into their facilities for certification. I'm wondering if Louisiana Tech is exploring this option, and do you think this approach could hold promise to enhance the pipeline of qualified air traffic controllers?
yes, sir, I think anything will reduce the workload on them. I mean, that 5 weeks off by us providing them in other universities is a significant resource reduction.
Appreciate that. I also want to focus on recruitment and the importance of ensuring airport-adjacent communities such as Newark and Elizabeth in our district, which often experience the impacts of airport operations most acutely, also see the economic benefits. Airlines and labor unions continually raise the issue of an aviation maintenance technicians or AMT shortage. AMTs are tasked with ensuring that aircraft are safe and meet the highest standards of airworthiness. These are well-paying, often union jobs that don't require a 4-year degree, and we should focus our recruitment efforts on local communities that have so much to offer. For any of the witnesses on the panel, how can we better connect airport-adjacent communities with careers in aviation?
I would start with the high schools.
Yeah.
There are career and technical education high schools, especially in New Jersey and in every county. I'm not sure how many of them offer aviation programs, but if there are employers in the area who would take them on as apprentices so they can do the school-to-work programs as they gain the stackable credentials, then you've got people from their local area who are getting trained locally. They're part of the community that wants to employ them afterwards, and they're making an investment right where they grew up, which I think would be pretty incredible.
Appreciate that. Any other panelists? Mr. Robbins, how would you, in terms of introducing exposure to the aviation industry at an earlier point and sort of some of the cost barriers, especially for local high schools, elementary schools, Do you believe that drones and the use of drones in high schools is a more affordable, cost-efficient option to give people some exposure, not just to this burgeoning industry, but also to the larger aviation industry?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Congressman. Absolutely. We actually partner with the FAA on the Know Before You Fly program, which was extended in the FAA Reauthorization Act, which we appreciate your leadership on. That program, one of its initiatives is actually sending drone kits to schools so that students can become familiar with the technology, familiar with flying, and sort of learn the fundamentals associated with drones, which hopefully sparks an interest in an aviation career. Maybe it's in drones, maybe it's advanced mobility, maybe it's in another segment of more legacy aviation. But the goal behind that program is to sort of spark that excitement and to build a little bit of foundational knowledge that they can build upon in later programs.
That's great. I appreciate your work on this and look forward to continuing to partner with you. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Menendez. The other gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Van Drew, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got more than one from New Jersey, right? It's good to be with you. Staffing shortages are plaguing the vast majority of industries in our country right now, especially aviation. And you know this is what we've been talking about all morning. It's why it's essential that the measures in the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024 are carried out to the fullest extent of the law, to provide the necessary and appropriate staffing levels to keep American travelers safe. It's great we have it in the law, but we also have to enforce the law. I'm excited that my proposed amendment to make the FAA Technical Center permanent and more specifically dedicated to advanced aerospace has been enshrined into law as well. I want to thank Chairman Graves, Ranking Member Larson, and the full committee, Chairman Graves and Ranking Member Cohen on the Aviation Subcommittee for their hard work to put this reauthorization together in general. It was a pleasure working with all of them and all of you. The newly named FAA Technical Center for Advanced Aerospace will be a permanent fixture in the southern New Jersey community, providing a steady stream of jobs and opportunity for technical advancement aimed at bettering the safety and the capabilities of air travel. By streamlining and optimizing the FAA's organizational structure to facilitate as much technological advancement as we possibly can, the American aviation industry won't only be able to compete with China, they will be able to supersede China, and they will remain the gold standard for advanced aerospace development and practice. Now that the FAA reauthorization has been signed into law, as I said, and I'll probably say over and over again, it has to be enforced. As a side note here, not really a side note, something I think of interest. During a recent visit to the Atlantic City airport, I discovered that the flight control tower, I was amazed at this, that they still used floppy disks. Floppy disks. They've been done for a quarter of a century. They use them for their IDS-4 systems. It's a piece of technology, it's actually from 1994, we researched it. It's responsible for tracking and all reference information for flight patterns, weather conditions, and other items integral to air traffic control. Floppy disks. They haven't been used for a long time, and they're obsolete. And thank God the Tech Center is planning to roll out an updated system to replace this technology in FY25. But this is not just happening at the Atlantic City airport. It's happening across the country. This technology is still used across the country. It's obsolete. It's obsolete technology. It also greatly exacerbates workforce issues. It takes hundreds of thousands of hours to update the information in the IDS-4 system, which requires pulling personnel from other departments that are already facing these significant staff shortages. How can places like the FAA control towers be behind the times so much technologically? Who wants to answer that question?
I'm all ready to jump in here, so thank you.
You were ready, I could tell.
I'm ready.
Body language.
Let's go with this one. Thank you for that. Look, it takes the FAA many years to implement new systems. They have waterfalls, the process that they have to determine they need a new system and give to the program management organization to build a contract and send it out to a contractor, and it takes 6 or 7 years to put out one system across 400 airports in the country is antiquated. We have a workforce out there that in technical operations, if properly staffed, properly trained, can implement multiple systems at multiple times, and you're not sitting around waiting for this to get done and continue to be funded while there are dozens and dozens of programs that are running, implementing a variety of different systems. If we begin to implement systems using the operational workforce that we have that are the best at doing this at every airport, we wind up getting way out in front of this in 10 years from now.
Are these internal actions that take place? Does this require, this doesn't require legislation, right? I mean, this is something.
Well, it would require staffing and funding, and you do have a bit of a fine line here, a bright line between implementation money and operations money that the FAA has to figure out how to manage. But at the same time, that's the solution to the problem. Use the thousands of employees we have across the country to not only staff them well enough so that they can do this work and that work. We can walk and chew gum, just give us the opportunity.
So I would look forward to, and I'll close with this. I have other questions, but I'll submit them for the record. I would look forward to working with you all on that, and I know there are other members here who would as well, if we really do want to be on the cutting edge. I mean, it's not like we were a little behind there, you know, and I'm not being critical of anybody. I love the FAA. I know the people that work there well, supportive. It's just that's not fair to them. It's not fair to the United States of America. It's not fair to the air industry. It just isn't a good thing. So I'd love to work on that. Please get in contact with my office and my people, and I know there's other folks as well. With that, Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Van Drew. Recognize the gentlelady from Nevada, Ms. Titus, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Mr. Robbins, for acknowledging earlier our work together. It's been a pleasure. You are a real resource for our caucus, and I thank you for your help there. And the chairman's leadership, we've worked well together, and this industry is going to miss you, I have to say, Mr. Graves. So just put that on the record. I'd like to go back to some of the grants in the FAA reauthorization program. There's one that Mr. Stanton introduced. It's called Drone Infrastructure Inspection Grant. I was pleased to co-sponsor it. I wanted to get off the ground, no pun intended, but we have some programs like that in my district, and I think other areas could benefit from it. So as the FAA rolls out programs like that, do you have any recommendations for how they might improve that process, get the word out, assist with application processes?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, ma'am. And again, thank you for your leadership as co-chair of the Unmanned Systems Caucus. The two of you, you and Chairman Graves, have done terrific work together, and we appreciate it. The Drone Infrastructure Inspection Grant Act is a terrific bill that was wrapped into the FAA reauthorization, and the UAS industry is extremely grateful for that. As we all know, across the country, our nation's infrastructure is struggling. It's crumbling. There's lots of inspection required. We don't have the workforce and the number of people to be able to do it and to do it safely. The Drone Infrastructure Investment Grant Act is a program to allow states to use drones and hire the workforce to use those drones to engage in critical infrastructure inspection. Now, the program's only been authorized about 2 months, so some baby steps have taken place, but not a whole lot yet. But we stand ready to work with the Department of Transportation, the FAA, and state DOTs to build awareness about this program, to ensure it's implemented. And we are pleased to see that while not fully funded, it did receive near fully funding in the appropriations bill, and we're hopeful that we can get that full funding before the appropriations are done.
Great. Will you just keep us kind of posted on how that
Absolutely.
moves forward?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, thank you. And speaking of out-of-date things, there's a real challenges in modernizing facilities and equipment. The budget request this year was nearly $500 million increase for this equipment and facilities. And there's a new proposal, I believe it's called the Facility Replacement and Radar Modernization Program, that's $8 billion over the next 5 years, replacing old, aging radar systems. The average age for many of these facilities is 60 years old. You heard about the floppy disk. I just wonder, Mr. Sparrow, your members are doing the critical maintenance and repair of these systems, the technology. What implications do you think this increase will have for your workforce, and what are the areas that need the greatest amount of investment?
Well, everything needs a great amount of investment. And I think it depends on the systems you're talking about. We do have a blend of very modern technologies that we take care of, state-of-the-art things. At the same time, there are legacy systems out there. And part of that has to do with the process that the agency uses to replace this. It's going to take a very long time to replace all of the radar systems that they're talking about. But at the same time, the life cycle for those systems is out of date. It's difficult sometimes to get parts for these systems. You all have been talking about these for a little while now, airport surface detection equipment. Nobody wants to make them. And the fact of the matter is, it's too expensive to put them out there. You have to find other technologies. So the impacts on our folks clearly are we're maintaining legacy systems right now, and at the same time, they're implementing and we're maintaining new technologies. And across the board, we're having to get involved in various electronics disciplines in the tech ops world. And that's not the best way to develop proficiency. Now we've got to go to training as well. And Oklahoma City is where all the classes go. So now we have a backlog of training that it takes to go to school out there and get all the folks certified. So it's the process right now is enormously time consuming and it's very costly.
So it's a good investment, but it comes with challenges and new demands on your workforce.
It does, and it takes opportunity. You have to think outside of the box a little bit in some way, shape, or form to find ways to implement these things more quickly.
Ms. Damato, in your world, do you find this investment in equipment and all, how's that affecting your folks?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. We need modernized equipment everywhere and also for the training environment. We need to be able to train the youth who are in the programs right now and who are going to be working with us. They want to work on the latest and greatest technologies and be proficient in it. That's what they do in their personal lives outside of the industry, so they should expect to work with the same type of equipment when they have the opportunity in their profession.
I think going into the high schools and talking about the excitement of this new technology and the careers that you can have is just really important. I'm glad y'all are doing that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Titus. Recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. D'Esposito, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Air traffic controllers are the backbone of our national aviation infrastructure, safeguarding the journey of nearly 100,000 flights per day. Their skill is essential to upholding the standards of safety and efficiency in American aviation and deserve to be treated as such. Unfortunately, this is the opposite of what is happening because of the FAA's failure to address the staffing shortfall at the N90 TRACON facility and other facilities across the nation. The FAA began issuing forced relocation letters to 17 controllers at N90 to Philadelphia in the next 12 weeks. July 28th is the first day for them to operate in Philadelphia. Last year, I secured language in the House version of the FAA reauthorization plan that safeguarded jobs at N90, which falls right in the center of my district. My language would have prevented the FAA administrator from requiring forced transfers from N90 to Philadelphia and prevented the FAA from reducing staffing levels of N90. While this was unfortunately removed from the final FAA reauthorization bill in the Senate, I was glad to see other provisions that would address the shortfall included, but want to ensure that these provisions help the N90 facility. So to Ms. Damato and Mr. Montgomery, as you know, Section 437 directs the FAA to set the minimum hiring target for new air traffic controllers for each of the fiscal years 24 through 28. It also directs the Transportation Research Board to identify the most appropriate staffing models for future air traffic controller workforce needs and requires the FAA to revise its staffing standards no later than May 16th of 2025. From your industry perspectives, how do you believe the increased hiring targets for air traffic controllers will impact operations at critical and complex facilities like the N90 TRACON in the long term?
Well, thank you for that question. And obviously, our members operate in N90 and in the Northeast and all around the country and the world at great volume. So we appreciate that we need the staffing at all of the airports and all of the centers, and we don't want to be experiencing delays just like any other of the traveling public because the staffing can't meet the demands of the industry.
Thanks, sir. I think we need to forecast better. We keep on hitting low and high trends with aviation, with all our professions. If we can forecast better and we could train to those standards, we could produce to those standards. So in the end, I think it's a forecasting issue.
Ms. Damato, while these provisions will help in the long term, given the imminent forced relocations at the N90 facility, in your opinion, what else can be done to address the staffing at N90 TRACON in the short term other than forced relocations?
This is just not my area at NBAA. I'd be happy to get to my colleagues in Air Traffic Services and get back to you after the hearing.
That would be great. Mr. Montgomery?
I'm probably not the right person to ask. For the last 30 years, the government told me to go somewhere, I went somewhere.
Yeah, so obviously this is an issue that I know is specific to my district and the N90 facility, but I believe that it's a problem that's happening across the country. And I think that there are so many other opportunities for the FAA to find ways, people in training, and send them to places that we needed instead of taking hardworking air traffic controllers that have been in these facilities for so long, people that have roots in the communities that they live in, people who have, unfortunately, children that need certain care that they could only get here or back home in the tri-state area, now being forced to relocate. So I thank you all for being here today. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. D'Esposito. Recognize the gentlelady from Oregon, Ms. Chavez-Dreamer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. I wasn't sure if it was still morning. Earlier this year, through my work on the Education and Workforce Committee, the Flight Education Access Act was included in the major student loan reform package. This common sense proposal closes the pilot workforce gap by letting prospective pilots access the same loan opportunities available to students at traditional four-year schools. It increases the total maximum amount of federal direct unsubsidized Stafford loans an eligible dependent may borrow to $111,000, and it increases the maximum amount for independent students to $137,500, and increases the maximum amount of federal direct Stafford loans to a total of $65,000. This is a huge step in resolving the shortage of pilots and signal to those concerned about the high costs of commercial pilot school that their representatives want to help. Last February, FAA Administrator Whitaker called this bill a very useful initiative. Mr. Montgomery, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this bill as well. So here's the question. If prospective pilots could access these types of student loans and use them when completing the FAA's regulated training, would that help improve the pilot shortage?
Yes, ma'am. From my perspective, and thank you for the question, is our dropout rate, 68.2, the primary reason is money. There's so many Americans that cannot afford flight that any help you can give them, it's going to increase production.
Mr. Sparrow, I'll ask you your thoughts as well on the student loan assistance for pilots in our bill. Do you believe this will help with recruiting, one? And two, do you see any other barriers to recruitment as well that pertain to flight school?
So not necessarily my area of expertise when it comes to the private sector and where they go, but from the perspective of opportunities within the FAA, as folks get more seasoned in aviation jobs, the opportunities to become aviation safety inspectors from that world could be opened up tremendously if we could get the funding to assure that we can hire the inspectors that we need and get the numbers correct so that we know how many aviation safety inspectors we need across the country. Those opportunities are part of the pipeline for people to advance into jobs.
Thank you. Flight school can definitely be expensive, especially with the amount of hours required for prospective pilots to meet. The United States must make sure that the best pilot training and experience counts. Every pilot in America who flies in a Cessna 172 on a solo recreational flight gets to count those hours, and every crop duster does as well. However, neither of them has probably ever flown into Portland International or Atlanta Hartsfield Jackson. As our regulations are presently written, an airline first officer at a commuter airline is often unable to log his hours, even though he is part of the professional flight crew. Flying paying passengers into a major hub and participating in every aspect of the aircraft's operation. So, Mr. Montgomery, final question. Do you believe this to be a regulation that needs to be changed? And would such a change help alleviate the pilot workforce issues our industry currently faces?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. I do believe we need to look at more ways to document and get those pilot in charge hours, and that includes also large UAVs, whereas we're flying drones that are bigger than 55 pounds, they should be counted.
Okay, thank you. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll yield back my time.
Thank you, Ms. Shevers-Dreamer. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Montgomery, following up on Ms. Shevers-Dreamer's question, if I just heard you correctly, you said you had a dropout rate of 68%. Is that what I heard?
Yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit about prevailing issues or reasons as to why that's such a high percentage?
Yes, sir, thank you. Most of the students that I have coming through there, they struggle to go to school full-time, work full-time, and then they spend their entire week's paycheck on a couple hours of flight. So what happens is it's a negative downward spiral where they can't get enough training each month because they're trying to live and trying to go to school. So they take private pilot into a year or two later, and they're still in private pilot because they can't afford it.
So basically, cost and time constraints are two issues that are big obstacles to being able to finish the program?
Yeah, so that's the ones we can fix. The other obstacles it takes a lot to be a pilot. You have to multitask, you have to be able to communicate, navigate, stay in the air. So there's other things that are out there, but the money factor is something we can fix.
In regard to that 32% that does stay in the program, can you talk about the percentage of those that may stay in Louisiana versus those that leave, and why you believe we're unable to maintain a larger aviation workforce in the state?
Yes, sir. The majority of our students go outside of Louisiana because of the major airlines. The ones that do want to stay within Louisiana, they look for corporate or teaching gigs or something like that, but it's hard to find. With us building the Rotary Wing program, hopefully out of Lafayette sooner this year, we're going to look to better support Louisiana because Louisiana deserves to have pilots here.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Mr. Robbins, Section 937 of the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2024 directs the administrator to prioritize the authorization of additional eligible UAS test ranges in the Gulf of Mexico to look at the impacts of operations in saltwater environments and the transportation of cargo and passengers to offshore energy infrastructure. Can you speak about the important role that UAS test ranges play in terms of bringing new technologies and innovation to the marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that question and for your leadership. In many instances right now, the only opportunity for drones or other advanced air mobility to operate is over private land or in UAS test ranges designated by the FAA. And there are, while the test ranges that are in service right now are doing tremendous work, they are somewhat limited in terms of size and scale. And there's also significant portions of the country that lack test ranges, including, as you mentioned, in your area of Louisiana and the Gulf. So weather is very important. Factors, on local environment are very important to understanding how drones operate in different environments. So there does need to be a wider range of diversity in the test sites to be able to test different types of operations and different types of reliability.
Thanks. And the FAA's unique role to play as a partner and regulator when it comes to certification, integration, operational frameworks necessary for UAS, and Title IX of the FAA reauthorization bill made clear both the roles and responsibilities of the FAA through the process, and stressed the need for standardization across the board. How can we as Congress ensure that the FAA continues to evolve its standards to accommodate new aviation technologies, recognizing the dynamic nature of innovation, and workforce training while maintaining that gold standard of safety that we all talk about.
Yeah, thank you for that, Congressman. Well, first, there was a number of provisions in the FAA reauthorization bill that are laid out in our written testimony that direct the FAA to take steps to bring in new types of workforce. And that includes a sense of Congress that the FAA should look to the UAS Collegiate Training Initiative as a source for additional workforce to the FAA as they're hiring. As I mentioned in my opening, the needs of the UAS and AM industries for integration are different than they are for legacy aviation. But the certification for an 11-pound styrofoam drone looks a lot like the certification of a Boeing 777. So there's a need for some different skill sets and different ways of thinking about things there within the FAA. And I think the FAA bill, as you mentioned, has a lot of good provisions to change the way the FAA operates. So from your perspective now, it comes down to oversight and holding them accountable to timelines, holding them accountable. And every time you hold a hearing and you bring the FAA forward, it forces them to study, forces them to sort of dig in on these issues, and it brings them to the forefront. So we would encourage more hearings in the Aviation Subcommittee going forward that focus on advanced technologies, because that forces the agency to look at advanced technologies through a finer lens.
Mr. Robbins, thank you, and I am so excited about the future of your industry, and just look forward to see what the future holds.
We appreciate your leadership.
No, thank you. Mr. Montgomery, I've got someone here from Louisiana Tech, one of our interns, Emma Saraday from Addis is joining us today, and again, Louisiana Tech student. We also have Alex Foray, who's interning with our office and joining us, but I believe you have someone with you and want to give you an opportunity to introduce her.
Thank you, sir. I have my wife with me, Sheila. She's been a military wife for many, many years, so she's been okay.
Mr. Montgomery, I'll give you a chance to revise and extend your markers, otherwise you're going to pay for that. No, thank you very much for joining us. I have a unanimous consent request. I'm asking unanimous consent to enter in the record statement by the Regional Airline Association received July 10th, 2024, without objection, so ordered, I believe. No? You guys have a UC or no? Okay. With that, are any further questions from any members of the subcommittee who have not been recognized? Seeing none, that concludes our hearing for today. I'd like to thank each of the witnesses for your testimony. Asking unanimous consent to the record, today's hearing remain open at such time as the witness have provided answers to any questions may be submitted to them in writing without objection, so ordered. Also asking unanimous consent the record remain open 15 days for any additional comments and information submitted to members or witnesses be included in the record of today's hearing without objection, so ordered. Subcommittee stands adjourned.